Thursday, November 5th. I'll begin with a land acknowledgement that Missoula County acknowledges that this event today takes place in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Can you cue up the flag, Emmy? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thanks everyone. Any public announcements? I will begin with two. First, congratulations to Commissioner Juanita Vero for winning her race earlier in the week. She will be with us on the Board of County Commissioners for the next 6 years. So welcome back.
That's a good thing for all of us, I think.
Thank you.
And also just a shout out to everyone who helped with Missoula County elections, be it community volunteers, our election staff, other county employees who helped with this. It was a huge undertaking. I thought everyone did an excellent, superb job and pulled it off relatively seamlessly. So thank you. Any other announcements, Juanita, staff?
Nope.
Okay, is there any public comment on items not on today's agenda? Bearing in mind we have 3 public hearings later, that will be the opportunity to comment on those items. Is there anything else that folks would like to comment on at this point? Okay, and just by way of some housekeeping, during each of the public hearings, how these will work is folks will have, well, we'll begin the public hearing with a staff report. We will then move into an opportunity for the applicant or applicant's representative to present. We'll then have an opportunity for public comment. The commissioners will be able to ask questions of staff or the applicant, and then we'll move into a period of deliberation and discussion by the commission. When it's time for public comment on each of these items, since we do have a fairly, well, I guess it has yet to be seen how lengthy the agenda will be. We've got 3 items. There are at least a couple that I think are of significant public interest. So I would just ask everyone to be as brief as possible. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. If folks prior to you have said the exact same thing that you were planning on saying, no need to be too redundant, and you can certainly chime in and succinctly state your position, but no need to go into a great detail of just reiterating all those previous comments. And as far as how we're going to take public comment, if you're on Teams, and it looks like most folks are using the video function here, please raise your hand. In your screen, on your screen, there should be a menu bar. Of the choices, there's one that has an icon that looks like a small raised hand. Click on that, and then I'll try to take folks in order of who has raised their hands. If you're just calling in by phone, I will do my best to ask who is on the line would like to comment, and I'll probably articulate your phone number so you know who it is I'm calling on. If I forget you, just chime in, interject, and we'll get you in the lineup here. So any comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, our current claims list, and these are claims received as of October 15th through October 28th by the Commissioner's Office, total $4,333,335.07. If any of you are financial geeks out there and want to drill down into what that 4 million plus number actually is composed of, if you go to the electronic version of the agenda for today's meeting, there's a link that will allow you to drill down into the specifics. So without further ado, let's begin our public hearings. I'll open with our first public hearing, which is a resolution to rezone 3705 Highway 200 East, and we'll begin with a staff report by Matt Heimel.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Everyone, I'm Matt Heimel with CAPS. I'll be presenting this item. And I just want to make sure before I proceed that the applicant or applicant's representative is on the call. You can hear everything okay?
Yes, yep, I'm here.
Okay, thanks. So let me share my screen. Okay. So yes, today's the scheduled public hearing on a proposed resolution to adopt rezoning for property at 3705 Highway 200 East. So here's a general map of the site location prepared by the applicant's representative. So to summarize the proposal, Tri-East Incorporated, which is represented by Paul Forsting with IMEG, is proposing to rezone properties addressed as 3705 Highway 200 East. The specific lots shown in green on the screen are legally described as lots 5 through 11 and lots 16 through 26 of Block 19 of the East Missoula Edition in Section 24, Township 13 North, Range 19 West. So this approximate 2.3 acre property is currently zoned CR3 residential with the Canyon Gates Ole's plan variation. So before going further, I'd like to give some project history for how this began and how we got to this point. So in 2011, the subject property was rezoned from a CC2 commercial, general commercial zoning district to a CR3 residential district with the Canyon Gates Ole's plan variation. And so that what that plan variation means is there was a intention for a attached housing unit development, and the plan variation comes in to modify yard and building areas and modify the density and space and bulk requirements within that zone. So fast forward to this past January through February of 2020, the applicant approached CAPS with IMEG to discuss the potential for storage units and what the process would be to get there given the zoning designation. And so staff looked into this, we researched a little bit and concluded that the plan variation, which had a specific development plan tied to it, superseded the CR3 district. And that CR3 district did have a special exception allowance for storage units, and I'll get into what special exception use is in a little bit here. But essentially the plan variation superseded that, and the only path to develop storage units would have been through a rezone. And staff recommended that the rezone application be for the CC1 neighborhood commercial due to the neighborhood center land use designation in the Missoula County growth policy. So an application came in over summer, and we had a public hearing with the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board on September 1st, 2020, and the board recommended approval 6-2 of the request to rezone to CC1 commercial. Then on September 24th, 2020, the Board of County Commissioners adopted the resolution of intent to rezone the subject property. This prompted a public notice period. And following publication of the notice, Missoula County received 22 individual comments. As of the last time I checked my email, that was up to 22 individual comments. Resolution 2020-1013 from the East Missoula Community Council, and a petition with numerous signatories, all in objection of the proposed rezone. Sorry about the lights. I had a feeling that would happen eventually. So got distracted by the lights. A few themes came up in those public comments that we noticed. Some of them were in objection of a commercial zone for a neighborhood center that would also allow storage units. Some expressing a need for housing development. And one other comment that I saw in a few notes in the petition, and one I received today that is also was forwarded to our record of the comments. One was expressing that there was a perception that the notice that we provided was deceptive or misleading to the public. And I would just like to provide a little bit of clarification for our notification procedures on rezoning projects. So the notice that we mail out to property owners, publish in the newspaper, and post on the property is really to get people informed that there is going to be a public hearing on a land use matter. And in that notice, we are required to provide the general character of the proposed zoning district. So this notice was for a rezone hearing from a residential to a commercial zone, not necessarily a notice of a storage unit development, because the application on hand was strictly just for a zone change. Within it was the intended use for storage units as a commercial use. However, in our notice, we state the general character of the district, and we do that by stating the intent of the district. So we copy the CC1 neighborhood commercial intent from the Missoula County zoning regulations, which reads that this district provides convenient shopping for a limited neighborhood market, which involves retail enterprises dispensing commodities and providing personal or professional services to the individual. And that's, I think there could be some confusion that perhaps the intent is the developers or applicants' intent, which it is not. So the intent that we quote is from our own regulations. In that letter, we also have a link to the application and state that the application is available for inspection in our office, and people are welcome to contact us with questions as stated in that notice. And I'm happy to also go into any more questions about our notice or review procedures too, if anyone has questions. So moving on, back to the proposal. So per the application we received, the applicant does intend to utilize the property for commercial use, and as stated in the application, the intended commercial use is storage. So the applicant is proposing a commercial zoning designation to allow for this use. Some notes on surrounding land uses. The surrounding land uses include commercial to the north and west and residential to the south and east. And adjacent zoning districts include CC2 general commercial to the north, east, and west, and properties to the south are unzoned. So here's a map of zoning prepared by the applicant's representative, just also showing those zoning districts. So again, the proposal is to CC1 neighborhood commercial. One of the primary review criteria is for growth policy compatibility, and the applicable land use plan in this case is the Missoula area land use element dated 2019, an amendment to the 2016 Missoula County growth policy. Land use element does designate this property as neighborhood center and recommends land uses with a mix of residential, neighborhood services, offices, retail, and institutional uses. I also received some questions regarding the nature of permitted, conditional, and special exception uses when looking at our county zoning regulations. So to summarize how these are broken down, each zoning district has allowable uses which are classified as either permitted, conditional, or special exception. A permitted use is one that's specifically listed as permitted, and it is meets the intent of the district and does not need additional conditions or a special review. Some of these permitted uses do require review under Chapter 3 of our zoning regulations for general regulations such as parking and landscaping. However, in general, there are no special review provisions for a permitted use. A conditional use is a use which also meets, but there are specific design standards and conditions that must be met. So those refer to Chapter 4 of the zoning regulations, which are special design standards. And those can include things such as like additional setbacks for particular use, extra landscaping also, requirements for street frontage on a particular kind of road classification. Maybe it needs to be an arterial or collector street. And some of these requirements in Chapter 4 also refer to certain architectural finish materials need to be compatible. And those are just a few examples. Chapter 4 covers a lot of ground for different uses. but that's generally how a conditional use is reviewed. The last kind, a special exception use, is also specifically listed as meeting the intent, but this needs a very special review and needs to be reviewed for compatibility and consistency with other existing and conforming land uses in the district. And these go to the Board of Adjustment for a public hearing, a notice public hearing, similar to how we are conducting a hearing right now. To close out my presentation on this item, I'll show the criteria for review from Montana Code Annotated 762203. These are those listed in statute, and the staff report in the packet also has additional items for review. With that, we are at the close of a comment period. We did receive ample public comment on this item, so I can also take questions on this matter, as can the applicant's representative. And options for today are to either approve the resolution to rezone or deny the resolution to rezone. And again, I can take any questions at this time.
And just to be clear, Matt, the comment period is still open. So if folks are here wanting to comment on this item, your comments will be considered by the Board of County Commissioners today. And even though by statute, which I don't want to get into the weeds on this, which has been the language on the books in the state of Montana has actually been ruled unconstitutional, I believe, as it relates to protests and such. Suffice it to say, we are accepting comments on this item today.
That's correct. Sorry to misspeak. Yeah, the public comments are not closed. I just received some, and I'm sure we'll receive some more comments very soon. Okay,
thanks, Matt. With the applicant or applicant's representative, and I believe the representative is Mr. Paul Forstein. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thanks, Dave. Paul Forstein, Territorial Landworks, now IMEG. I'm a planner here at our office. I wanted to start by saying I appreciate Matt's efforts and their work on the application. I don't know that Matt concluded that they had a recommendation for approval. I'm not sure. That was the initial staff report recommendation for approval, and I appreciated that. How we got to that approval, and Matt, maybe I see you're chiming in. I didn't mean to call you right back, but maybe we'll circle back to it, Matt. I did appreciate the recommendation from approval that we had, and that we took that to the planning board. That recommendation of approval came from the planning department's thorough analysis of the criteria for this rezone. When we go for a rezone, it's very important that we have strict compliance with the growth policy. And the planning department had very thoroughly evaluated that and determined that we had complied with the growth policy. As Matt has left us on the screen, that's a very important criteria for making the determination. What we have here is this property sits in the middle of a commercial corridor. It's labeled as a neighborhood center on the land use plan. We are the only non-commercial district that is in, we're the only non-commercial zoning district aligning that adjoins the highway and is in a mix of commercial industrial uses. Our site is surrounded by a radiator repair store. It's got both a diesel repair store, a diesel parts store, a donation warehouse center, a storage unit facility. That's the most recent use. We have a trucking facility. We have a couple of casinos, a liquor store, a boat repair. We have a trucking equipment storage site. Our site itself is used for parking and storage. The point is that our neighborhood is very developed and existing. And so when we talk about storage units not being appropriate here, well that's what the existing uses are there. It's not uncommon for storage units to be found in all of our neighborhoods. We find them all the time in residential neighborhoods and purely residential neighborhoods. And those, you might be surprised, but all through our community, they're found there. And we don't find that they generate all that much crime. We don't find that they generate all that much traffic. They do generate taxes, and they do bring site improvements with them. And so they also bring lighting and things that we don't find in undeveloped sites. It's going to be, I completely understand the messaging that we're getting in our comments that we don't want storage units here, and if we could have, if we can select, well, we would like to have something different, and then often we're given a recommendation for what could be there. there's very limited commercial uses that fit in this neighborhood. There has been no sidewalks put in. There's no curb and gutter drainage. There is a coffee shop across the street, but it's purely a transient one where you'd be very out of place to walk to it. And so the point being with all that is not to say that we don't share a commercial vision that accomplishes a lot of the neighborhood goals, but saying that use is intimate, or excuse me, is what the highest and best use of the site and everything around it has been for different uses. It's just simply, it's a mix of commercial and light industrial uses there, all with varying parking lots. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of time before you see the ownership in this area change over and all the uses change out into a more of an urban mixed use corridor. And so to require the last undeveloped site to develop to that standard is really difficult. And it seems to be a unique set of standards put upon this landowner and not one broader applied to other similar uses and in the growth policy. Like I said, storage units are found in about all of our neighborhoods. It's not surprising we would see them in East Missoula or in the Bonner area. That's some of the densest populated area in our state. It surprises some folks because we don't see sewer all the way out there, but we do see a really high density of population over there, and we do see a lot of storage units there. You'll have to excuse me. I saw a message come up on the board, and it's hard not to be distracted by that. But what we see here is we have an undeveloped site. The landowner has watched all the other sites develop in the area. He's been waiting for zoning for a long time to come through. He mentioned 15 years of being under the impression that zoning was coming through, and so he's just taken the action of going through the zoning itself. We're asking for a zoning that is absolutely consistent with what all the neighboring properties have. It seems to me that the conditional use process is what folks are really upset with. But that's an opportunity that all those properties have along the highway, and to pick our property and say that we don't have that same opportunity to use that all the other neighboring properties do, including the one that created a storage unit, is we think it's unfair. We think it's being selective, and we would like your strong consideration of this commercial use today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forstein. Commissioner Vero, do you have any questions right now, or shall we dive right into public comment?
No, public comment is great. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Well, I'll open up the public hearing for public comment. I see some hands going up rapidly. So like I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of interest in this topic, and I would just ask of you to keep your comments succinct, 3 minutes or less. We're going to have one opportunity for each of you to comment, and then we'll have to move on. So I will begin with Stephanie Lemberg. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Is it unmuted?
It is. Welcome.
Okay. So, my name is Stephanie Lemberg, and I've lived at 307 Montana Avenue in East Missoula for 20 years. When I first moved out here, we had the reputation as a bad section of town. I thought it was beautiful. This is a quirky and unique area full of characters, and we kind of liked our reputation that we have. East Missoula's grown up almost without our noticing it. One by one, we got a church, a pawn shop, Hellgate Canyon storage, then apartments and more apartments. It seems oftentimes that things just happen out here. We don't know about the new projects. We think we can't do anything about them. But this time, thanks to an article in the Missoula Current, we had some warning. This time we had to act to preserve the very center of our community. This one time we had to act. I did not know what needed to be done when this started. None of us did. There was not much time, but there was a learning curve. Talking to neighbors, it became obvious that this was an extremely unpopular idea. I contacted the East Missoula Community Council and sat in on their October 13th meeting. It was very clear that the Community Council was opposed to this as well, and they drafted a resolution of opposition. The county commissioners said that we had the 8th to submit public comments, which was 2 weeks away. I started a petition the very next day. The first couple of hours were slow, but then people took notice. The petition has been shared over 100 times. It's been signed 646 times online and 74 times on paper. It has over 50 comments. a group of us started other actions to get the word out, to make sure that as many people as possible knew about this plan. Keep in mind that the majority of all the comments in opposition have happened in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, by people who have never really protested anything before. We didn't protest the other things. We didn't really know about it. We knew about this one. In this time, we've discovered that there's a land use plan for Missoula and East Missoula. This piece of property is in an area designated by the planners of Missoula as a neighborhood center. Matt showed that neighborhood center designation. It's one of only 4 neighborhood centers in the whole county. A neighborhood center sounds wonderful to us. Why in the world would we waste our special designation on storage units? I strongly oppose this rezoning. We deserve better.
Thank you, Ms. Lemberg. Appreciate that. Next on the list, Erica Hickey.
Hi, I'm Erica Hickey. Can you see me?
We can.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. I live on Placer Lane in East Missoula, and I've been a resident of East Missoula and a homeowner for almost 19 years. And I oppose this zoning request because I don't believe that it fits with the vision of our community. The Metropolitan Planning Organization just released plans that have been in the works for a long time. I was going to try and share a couple images. Of course, I haven't practiced this, so hopefully I can figure out how to do that. Can you see my screen, or is it just me still?
We cannot.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, here. I think I got it. Now?
Yep, we got it now. Thank you.
Okay, so these are just a couple of screenshots I took of the virtual meeting that was held, the virtual open house. This just gives you kind of an image of what it will look like driving into East Missoula, which is pretty cool. And then the sidewalks and the trees and the curbs and gutters spoken of previously are coming, and the bike lanes. And this is an overhead view, and you can see where Ole's is here. And so there is a triangle right next to Ole's. Actually, I'm gonna go to the next slide. So right here, you can see this triangle, which runs along the Highway 200 corridor. And so in this plan, this is a spot designated for food trucks and, you know, maybe a small market, farmer's market, picnic tables. And the vision of storage units butted right up against that, just as a background, basically. Just doesn't fit with this beautiful vision that has been in the works for so long. So rather than beautifying our community, this rezoning request doesn't meld with that. So yeah, raising a family out here for years and years, I feel like our community deserves something better. So I oppose this zoning request.
Thank you, Erica. Next, Richard Fifield.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, welcome, Richard.
It's too bad you can't see me because I'm wearing my East Missoula shirt because I have so much pride in our community. So I'm just going to go really quick. I know we have limited time. I wanted to clarify a point that the gentleman before you said, that it is a purely commercial site. That is not true. I myself lived at 3720 Highway 200 East. There are still 5 trailer houses behind the coffee shop, and we cannot discount those people. It is not a purely commercial area. When I moved here in 2000, I lived at 3720 Highway 200 East, and my friend was struck and killed by a drunk driver on the highway because there was no safety, none. So inspired by that, I joined the East Missoula Community Council just to get a crosswalk, okay? A crosswalk. I was a member of the East Missoula Community Council for 2 years, And this was in 2007, and we spent all of our time developing a community vision, none of which came to fruition. And as you can imagine, it's a little frustrating. Last year, my property taxes went up 27%. After staying stagnant for 15 years, 1 year, 27%. And if that's going to pay for a storage unit, that makes me very angry because I live on Montana Avenue where we have no streetlights, no sidewalks. We can't have mail or anything delivered to our addresses in the wintertime because it's too dark. So I don't believe in investment unless the storage units are willing to kick down to, give back to the community. If they want to invest in our community, they will give us money for a crosswalk. They will help us build infrastructure. But as it is right now, they got to pay to play. I'm sorry, a storage unit does not offer anything to our community. And all these things that have raised my property taxes, all these new housing units and the gentrification of East Missoula, as us locals call it, it is not compatible with, we're not seeing any return on it. So we are paying for other things to be built or not built. Why would we pay for a storage unit when we don't even have sidewalks or streetlights? And I object to these storage units because that is not a purely commercial place. There are 5 residences across the street next to the Aspen Motel. I know because I lived there. So, that's all I have to say is if they want to build a unit, then they need to invest in the community, and the community council needs to get their poop in a group and figure out how to get this community plan going, because it's been 13 years and we have nothing to show for it. No crosswalks, no streetlights, no nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fifield. Next on the list, Tasia.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. I'm a Missoula resident. I own property on Utah Avenue. I've been here 14 years, and I do love East Missoula. And Paul, I do love walking to that coffee shop. And yes, I do feel out of place. You're right. That's how I feel right now. And I would love to feel like we have a place that we could feel safe and included in. And Paul, there are no other places to dispute. This is the center of East Missoula, and I know that we can do better than storage units. So I oppose this zoning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Next, we have Aaron or O'Riordan. Sorry if I slaughtered your name.
It's O'Riordan.
O'Riordan. Okay, there we go.
My name is Erin O'Riordan. I am a homeowner at 546 Speedway Avenue here in East Missoula, and I oppose this rezone. East Missoula already has a land use plan in place and a vision for our community and our neighborhood, which this rezone is in direct opposition of. This rezone request not only dishonors our vision for our community, it directly impedes it. I went door to door in my neighborhood when I found out about this request. I went to at least 40 different homes on the coldest day of the year so far, and 100% of the residents I spoke with not only did not know about this rezone request and the subsequent plans for yet more acres of storage units in the middle of our neighborhood center, but were directly against these plans. Our community has a vision and urgent wants and needs for our neighborhoods and our well-beings. You talked about it being all industrial and commercial anyway, but we are trying to change that. It feels like things happen to East Missoula without our input. Well, now we know about it and we are trying to stop this. This rezone request is a slap in the face to the past, present, and future residents of East Missoula, and I am in strong opposition. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Aaron. Next, we have Joshua Lee. Oh, is this Lee Bridges?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Lee.
But
You're
no,
really
that wasn't,
faint.
actually. I think that's a different Lee.
Oh, really? Okay. Is there a Joshua Lee out there?
It must be my husband. I must be under my husband's name. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we have you. Who do we have the pleasure of speaking with?
Hi, my name is Samantha Keller. I've been a Montana resident my whole life. Been in Missoula 15 years. We bought a home in East Missoula on Dakota Avenue over 4 years ago. We're raising 3 kids here. And I am strongly opposed to the rezoning. I have storage units. The first speaker mentioned that storage units don't bring any crime or traffic, and I have storage units directly next to my house. My kids have seen public urination. My kids have seen couples fighting. We've had people vandalize our property, and all those have been right next door due to storage units. I also think, yeah, so on public safety and general welfare, I don't think that's a good thing for us. If we want to let our kids walk down to the gas station or take their bikes down there, I think that opens that area up to, I know part of it is to deter from vagrants, but that has not been my experience living directly next to storage units. Those people and drug unit users seem to flock to those areas. So I do think it impedes our public safety and our general welfare. I agree with the prior comments. I have a vision of East Missoula too. I've sat in on the community council meetings. My husband was a volunteer firefighter, and it has such potential, you know, with the sidewalks in place and the biking to be such a great area to raise our kids. And I don't see how more storage units are going to benefit us in any way. Also, the first speaker said there is a population here. People think there's not a lot of people out here. There is, and there's a lot of families, and there's not a lot of family recreations or shops. And that's what I would like to see more of in this community. There's already three storage units within a 3-block radius of my house on Dakota Avenue. And as I stated before, my kids have been in their own backyard and seen people urinating on the side of storage units and other things like that. So I just think it's the wrong direction for East Missoula. I think it opposes the vision that everyone has been laying out for East Missoula for a long time. And I do have safety concerns in regards to letting my kids go down to Ollie's to buy a snack with their chore money with more storage units on their route. So I do strongly oppose this. I want our community to be one of safety and sidewalks and beauty. And I do, I have seen firsthand that it does interfere with our public safety. You know, my kids have been scared hearing couples fighting in their storage units. I've actually had to bandage someone and do first aid to someone who was on some kind of drugs or alcohol, I don't know what, but was bleeding all over and came to my property because of that. And the sheriff presence, you know, they don't get here quick enough, and they say, oh, they have a right to be at their storage unit anytime they want. There's no regulations on when people can be coming and going, and it can be very disruptive to a family. And yeah, and I strongly oppose it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Wyatt Frampton.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Wyatt Frampton, and I own and reside in a property located on Buttercup Lane. My property is less than a mile from the proposed rezoning location, and I would like to I'm here to oppose the rezoning proposal to allow the storage complex. I believe rezoning this property for storage purposes is detrimental to the community and at odds with the vision described through the efforts the county is currently going through. East Missoula needs several things: affordable housing, dining options, a local store, painted crosswalks, or a park. But what we do not need is another storage unit complex. Placing a complex here will have long-term detrimental effects to the future of this community. And again, it is out of sync with ongoing planning efforts where gutters, trees, and sidewalks are being planned. A few other things I'd like to highlight about my opposition. There are currently 10 storage facilities within a 3-mile radius of this location. Storage complexes employ few, if any, full-time employees. Storage complexes provide few services and little to no value to the residents that will be affected by their development, while taking valuable space which could be used to provide other needed or beneficial services to the community. Storage complexes require constant lighting for security purposes, creating light pollution and perpetuating urban heat island effects, 2 factors that are already strongly present in this location and the corridor in general. The complex will visually conflict with the new vision currently being developed by Missoula County to revamp the highway corridor and will further perpetuate an out-of-date characterization of this community. Accepting this rezoning proposal closes the door to future opportunities to bring services that will actually benefit and enhance the community. Additionally, the urgency to build the complex seems odd given the 3-story, 440-unit storage facility being planned on Reserve Street, as reported by the Missoulian. I understand storage units are subject to market forces, but to move forward with this development seems to be a drastic increase in storage capacity for a problem I wasn't aware the county was facing. I believe there are better zoning options for a lot that sits at the community center and is indirectly abuts residential properties in a land limited area. I am not familiar with zoning applications, but when reviewing it, I found the lack of detail and specificity and general vagueness in the application disappointing, especially given the knowledge of the applicant for their intended future use of the property. Additionally, multiple claims were made in the application with no citation or data to support them. To close, I'd like to thank the commissioners for the opportunity to comment and would ask that the best and highest value of the land be considered for the community of East Missoula. Land is a finite resource in this value, and I would strongly encourage the commissioners to consider the long-term value of letting this community grow and thrive by supporting services that would benefit those that live here and enhance the community. We have an opportunity to position this growing community for future success, and I hope we appropriately seize it by rejecting this proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Wyatt. Next, we have Violet Hopkins.
Hi, thanks so much. I just want to make sure that my internet is working. Is it struggling?
Yep. No, we've got you.
Okay, good. Great. Thanks so much. So I noticed in his enumeration of the properties located in our community, Paul conveniently neglected to mention the several hundred homes surrounding those businesses in the corridor, which, I mean, obviously tells me how little he's considered the actual humans who lived here. So in any case, I've owned my property in Colorado for about 10 years, and I'm opposed to the rezoning plan, mainly because East Missoula already has an active and intentional land use plan, and rezoning doesn't fit that current plan. I fail to see how storage units meet the spirit of the CC1 zoning language, which frankly reads like a plan for Sesame Street and pretty much obfuscates, at least for the layman, which we all are, the actual possibilities contained in it. I found the CC1 zoning language, which was sent to property owners around the area, to be pretty vague. But now that the language and intent of the rezoning has been spelled out for us, both by the zoning, I guess, and by the property owner, the East Missoula community is clearly and resoundingly rejecting it. And I also would agree with Richard that if our property taxes, this is not something that I had clearly spelled out or thought out, but if our property taxes are going to continue going up, I'd like to see something for my money aside from another place for people to drop their trash as they vacate their storage unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Violet. Next, we have Janet Sedgley.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having us. Can you hear me?
Yep, we have you.
Welcome. Okay. Thank you. I've lived at my family home at 720 Michigan, just a few blocks up from this area, for 20 years, and I oppose this project and the rezoning related to it because it will affect the essential future nature of the community center, and there's no way around it. Once it happens, it would be very hard for us to get to where we were trying to go. And to the developer's comment, it seems unfair for this property owner to be the only one having to react to this. I find it kind of unique that there's been a wait for 15 years, and now just before the other plan is supposed to go into effect and would probably affect their future prospects of what to do with this is when they bring this up. So anyway, I strongly oppose. I think it would affect the nature of this area in a way that would be hard to rebound from. So thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Austin Britton.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name's Austin Britton, and I have a wife and 3 kids. We live in East Missoula. We're newer residents to the area. I'm an ordained minister at All Souls Church in Missoula, and I oppose the rezoning for a few reasons. One, I have not heard anyone in our current East Missoula community who supports it, and so I think it's really important that the people of the place where the rezoning is being proposed have a voice, and in my experience, that voice is opposed to it, and I think that needs to be deeply considered. I also think that again, I agree with the previous comments. We have a lot of storage units in the area already. I haven't heard of a deep need for more storage units from those in East Missoula. And I would also say that more storage units does put up fences. The ones that I'm familiar with in East Missoula have fences around them, and thus it actually cuts off access to land for children and for people who live in East Missoula. And so I concur with all the previous comments that it goes against the vision of East Missoula that many have. And so I oppose the rezoning. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Austin. Amanda Peters.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Well, my name's Amanda, and I live on Speedway Avenue. Obviously, I'm opposed to this rezoning and the storage units in general for all of the reasons that people have mentioned already. But I wanted to, really highlight that, for Mr. Forsting and the property owner, this doesn't have to be a situation where it's like the property owner versus the community. We really, I think, we want the opportunity to really actually side with whatever goes into this space, and to, be able to go there, to be able to put our money there, and to be able to really support it. And storage units, as everyone has said, does nothing for the people around it, and I think is just a very limited view of what this space potentially offers. And everyone is right in that, it doesn't have equivalent spaces, in this corridor. It is the space. And so, the onus of responsibility of making sort of initial steps to really to guide what this development is going to look like and how it's going to affect all of the people here. This property owner does have that responsibility more so than other property owners. And I don't know, if that's fair or not, but that's the reality of it. And I just want to end by saying, I oppose this rezoning, and I really look for the opportunity to actually side with this group and with this property owner to be able to invest in something altogether that's more mutually beneficial, because we want to support that property owner as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. Dylan Wright.
Hello, thank you for calling on me. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't seem to get my camera on, but oh, there we go. Hi, my name's Dylan. I have been here for a little over 10 years now. I also live here in East Missoula with children, and we are homeowners here. Absolutely love this community. We are so grateful that we live in East Missoula. It is such a unique community. I feel that East Missoula, that the folks in East Missoula have a lot of East Missoula pride, and I love that about us. You know, it's almost this. You know, we don't necessarily need or want to be part of the city, and we are right here in our own renegade way, and I love it. I just love it. That being said, East Missoula also has, you know, a reputation in the city of Missoula for still being on the other side of the tracks, and I just am afraid that you know, these storage units will perpetuate that image, and that's the only reason that I don't want to see that. I would love to see more shops and sidewalks and all that stuff. I'm an avid biker, you know, and I would love to see East Missoula be more accessible to the greater Missoula community, but I just don't think that the storage units are going to add to that for us. So I agree. I don't think we should have them. Thank you for holding this and for hearing everybody out. Go East Missoula.
Thanks, Dylan. Next, Samantha Hartman.
I think I got that. Hi, my name's Samantha. My partner and I live on Speedway Avenue, and just wanted to pop on. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. Just want to say that we strongly oppose the storage units in this rezoning. My first house I ever bought was in East Missoula. I love this community. We want to, you know, see the plans that have been talked about in the corridor planning and, you know, the live make community come to fruition, and we don't see the storage units as bringing value to that plan. So just want to say that we oppose these storage units and the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. Lee Bridges.
Can you hear me okay?
You're
Really
you sound like you're talking through a pillow or something, but if that's as good as it gets, we'll roll with it.
Okay. And I don't want to be redundant. I just want to say I'm Lee Bridges. I am a East Missoula landowner. I've lived here for 37 years, 203 Clyde Street. I do oppose this zoning request. I am also the chair of the East Missoula Community Council. Our council has been working on the East Missoula, it has been working with the Missoula County for years in updating our East Missoula growth plan. That was adopted last year in June of 2019. Matt, are you on here? And could you pull up the screen showing the 3 pages of the land use elements that I emailed you?
Will do, just a moment.
Thank you. If you'll go to the second page, I just want to show that that's residential, and I've done a close-up there so that you can see the residential areas specific to East Missoula. We don't need to talk about residential, so if you'll go to the next page, which is page 42, that is the neighborhood center, and that is, I just want people to understand, that is the area that this zoning is being expressed to be done in. I want you to look at the goals, and that neighborhood center that we have designed is designed to be a neighborhood focal point and the center of activity, providing opportunities for retail, service, and employment. It's also for providing services to residents within a 5 to 10 mile walk, and it's to accommodate higher intensity residential choices that contribute to a county-wide housing diversity. I do not feel that this storage unit proposed for this rezoning effort suits any of that criteria. And I just want to point that out and explain that that is why I am in opposition to this. I also want to ask Dave Strohmeyer, have you and Matt received my email that I sent you earlier today, a couple hours ago? I just want to make sure you got that.
Yeah, we got that, Lee.
Okay. Then I'm not going to repeat everything everybody else has said, but I do support all the comments that have been said, so thank you.
Thank you, Lee. So moving from East Missoula out to Bonner Milltown, we have Bert Caldwell on the line.
Actually, yes, I'm from Bonner, and I really don't have a dog in this fight. But I want to say something that I think maybe the commissioners couldn't say, not sure. It sounds like that the people in East Missoula are willing to have something put in that property that benefits the community more than the storage units do. And I would suggest that Paul get with Lee and work with the community through the community council to reach some form of an agreement with the people of the area as that would be both worthwhile for the community and profitable for Paul. And that's all I've got. Well, it's not all I've got, but I'm going to quit.
Yeah, I would have been surprised if that was all you had, Bert, but thank you. Yeah, it should be noted that up until the time that the commission takes action on an item before it, it's always the prerogative of an applicant to, if they so chose, to, I guess, essentially take their application and take their application off the table and rethink the what it is that they're proposing. But that, as of yet, has not happened. So thank you, Bert. Next, we do have a few phone numbers. I don't know if any of these folks are interested in commenting or not. I'll read off the last 4 digits of your phone number. If it is an item that you want to comment on, please do at that point. You might be here for one of the other public hearings. So there's a number ending in 0400. How about 9017? One 949 5302. Okay, anyone else who has not already commented still want to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Questions from the commission? Any questions, Juanita?
Yeah, what sort of commercial activity can happen with the current CR3 zoning?
Matt?
Commissioners, Matt Heimel with CAP. So the current zoning with CR3 and the planned variation actually only allows for the specific attached housing development that was planned for in that Canyon Gates Ole's variation. To seek development of any other uses that are listed in the CR3 zoning district, there would also need to be a rezone hearing to rescind or eliminate that planned variation, essentially an overlay from the CR3. And I'm pulling up the CR3 zoning now to let you know what kinds of commercial use would be allowed. So if a property is zoned CR3, no Canyon Gates Ole's planned variation on top of it, there are some commercial uses allowed. So under conditional uses, which would need to meet the special use standards, there could be professional, business, or governmental office, personal services. There can also be multifamily dwellings as a conditional use, daycare center or community residential facility serving 9 or more persons, or long-term care facility. Now looking at special exceptions, so in CR3 there are a few special exception uses that would need to go to the Board of Adjustment, which would include a public hearing like we're doing today. So one of those is any of the permitted uses allowed in the CCI districts, so of a light commercial district as a special exception, a parking lot, eating establishments except for drive-in and drive-through restaurants. So drive-in and drive-through would not be permitted. A residential mini warehouse, so residential kind of storage units for personal use, would be allowed as a special exception through a public hearing of the Board of Adjustment if approved. And also public and quasi-public buildings and uses. So for example, a school is an example of the public and quasi-public use. Public utility installation is also a special exception. And also seasonal commercial and temporary uses are allowable as a special exception in CR3.
Thanks.
So essentially, the intent of the CC1 zoning that says it's to provide convenient shopping, limited neighborhood market, retail enterprises, dispensing community commodities and providing personal and professional services to the individual could happen through CR3 with, I'm sorry, what's the correct, what has to happen before the Board of Adjustments?
Through a special exception.
And that is more cumbersome or than what's being proposed now?
Well, if a development proposal is brought to the Board of Adjustment, they can impose conditions of approval. And at this time, I don't have a idea of what kinds of conditions we would have on a storage unit development on this property, but there could be more requirements placed on that in addition to what's listed in Chapter 4 of the zoning regulations. And there would be a public hearing with the public.
Okay.
Well, I don't have any questions. I have a few comments that I'll chime in with, and I will say that I will not be I will be opposing this zoning request for multiple reasons. First off, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that with the intended use that would be associated with this rezoning, it would be like driving a stake in the heart of East Missoula. Can you imagine the outrage of mini storage units in downtown Missoula next to the county courthouse, where a very different vision of what a community center might look like. And what we are basically talking about is the heart, the downtown core of East Missoula. And yeah, it might deviate from what might be envisioned as downtown cores in other communities, but it is exactly that. So there are three main reasons that I won't be supporting the rezoning request today, and then a handful of others that relate to the criteria that I'll mention. First off, the land use element. I don't think that this substantially complies with the growth policy and the land use element. If you look at the goals of neighborhood center for our recently adopted land use element, I cannot imagine how the intended use would align with the goals that are articulated there and that were flashed up on the screen earlier in terms of a neighborhood focal point and center of activity that provides retail service and employment. And none of this is meant to be an indictment on storage units per se. There's a very nice storage unit down the street from where this one is proposed, but there is something to be said for, will you reach a point of saturation for a certain type of use, and are there certain places in a community that a certain type of use is just unacceptable or counterproductive? Nothing in what is being proposed, as Lee Bridges mentioned, aligns with the imagery that's in our neighborhood center land use element description. I would also say that we currently have a rewrite of our zoning regulations in process, and there is no reason to believe that during that process And I would certainly hope we would give this consideration, given the bright light that this proposal has shined on our zoning, and that as we're crafting regulatory language, zoning districts, as part of that regulation update, we might want to consider that for some commercial zones, and maybe this would be one in question, a use such as mini storages is not something that we would want to allow. So that's in process. I think it would be highly premature and counterproductive to use an antiquated zoning district right now, and it would be far better to use what's on the ground right now to help achieve the land use element and growth policy goals. Finally, the third point I would make is that there is this Highway 200 corridor plan in process. I chair the Metropolitan Planning Organization's Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, which has been spearheading this effort, and there absolutely is a vision as part of that plan for creating transportation amenities such as sidewalks, connectivity, and you even saw some of the references to what might be envisioned on this particular property from one of the previous speakers. Just a few other points, looking at the review criteria that are part of any rezoning request. One item that sticks out like a sore thumb and might not have a month ago when we had our initial public hearing on this is whether this proposal considers the expressed public opinion of folks in the community. Well, I think prior to the realization that this zoning request would allow a use such as mini storage units, there was little, if any, virtually no outcry or concern, but clearly that has not borne out over the past month, and we probably had as much voluminous comment on this as any land use proposal that's come before me while I've been on the commission. So clearly this is not something that the community is broadly supportive of. There's a criteria here that goes into whether the zoning is designed to promote public health, public safety, and general welfare. Again, I would say the answer to that is an unqualified no. General welfare goes well beyond simply creating a repository for individuals' excess materials, and this is a strategic portion at the heart of East Missoula that if we're talking about general welfare, far extends beyond just a place to store material goods. I already mentioned whether the use conforms generally to the objectives of the adopted comprehensive plan and the purpose of this resolution. I think if you look at the land use element, which is an amendment to the growth policy as embodying that, this falls far short of the goals that were articulated in that, and I think which really would lend itself towards creating a vibrant neighborhood center. So I think I will stop talking there. Commissioner Vero, do you have any thoughts?
No, I just, you said them all, Dave. But wanting to reference Amanda Peterson's comment on trying to, how do we get to yes, and how do we find something that's mutually beneficial? And maybe this isn't the forum to do that, but well, I mean, I guess Paul can also withdraw this. And,
that is exactly right. One option certainly would be, and I think this may have come up once in another meeting recently, where I think the writing was starting to be on the wall, and there was an application that was withdrawn and gone back to the drawing board, so to speak. So that's certainly an option of the applicant, but we can conversely move forward with what is proposed and before us today. Mr. Forstein.
Well, I guess I don't know what that, thank you, Paul Forstein, IMEG. I don't know what that would look like. We requested, I actually initially sent in a zoning request that looks just like what the neighbors, what everybody else is in. It's more of a highway fronting commercial, and the planning department said that this neighborhood commercial would be better. And so I don't know what compromise there is to be had out there. I do feel like this is unfortunate. That box on there's a little kind of throwaway question on the application for a rezone that says, what's your proposed storage, what's your use? It does not have to be this. You know, the fact that we're all focused on storage units is just an unfortunate portion of the commercial language. I think everybody agrees that a commercial, well, I don't know if everybody agrees, but a lot of people agree that a commercial use is appropriate here, and that's simply what we're requesting. And so I don't know what flexibility we have for negotiation. If you're saying, hey, we're going to deny you, or you can take your fee back, your $5,000 fee that I believe we were tricked into paying because we're here now and we have support, and we wouldn't be here without that support. I feel like this was an effort to get us through this process because it generates the most fees, and it would create the most, it would be the most thorough, and we had support, but now we're here and we don't have support. So I guess I don't know where to go from here. The property owner's not happy, and he's felt very alienated in this conversation. And so I don't know what negotiation we have, Dave.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I do take exception with your thoughts there, Paul, as far as this is we're not in the business of making money from reviewing these proposals. And I think what staff probably directed you to is this is an option to get you the goal that you want. If indeed you have a project in mind, this is the zoning. This is a zoning option that will get you there. There are no guarantees for better or for worse going into these, and with whether it's a subdivision project or rezoning, it's a bit unfortunate that that we have governing body involvement at the very end of the process here. So I get folks' frustration from that standpoint, but the process is what it is. So thanks.
It looks like there's a couple hands up.
Well, one is Paul. Bert, did you have something else you wanted to add really quickly?
Yeah, I did, and it was more or less to Paul. Yeah, I know. I don't know where you live, Paul, but the owner of the business probably lives close by here. Again, I would recommend strongly that you get with Lee Bridges and work with the community council. And there may be something that that the owner can do that is both good for the owner and good for the community, or accepted by the community. And I would top off what Dave just said, that CAPS and the county, when they're reviewing this stuff, they don't live in the area. They go by what the policies are and what legitimate exceptions can be made. I don't believe, from past experience, I don't believe that they're looking at it to make money so much as they try to make it acceptable and let people go ahead and do what they want to do. But we also have to believe that the community is either going to prosper or suffer based on what goes into the community. And honestly, everybody on the commission knows I have had a few heartburns with what goes on at the Bonner Mill. So I say that with a little bit of experience, and I'll shut up.
And folks, if you've already commented, I would ask that you not raise your hand again. We need to move to formal action. This is the part of the meeting where the commission deliberates and takes action.
Okay, I'm gonna motion to deny the resolution to rezone the property zone CR3 with Canyon Gates and Ole's planned variation to CC1 neighborhood commercial.
I will second that motion. Any further discussion amongst the commission on the motion? Matt Heimel, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, Commissioners, Matt Heimel with CAPS here. I do have I have two motions prepared, one for either a decision, and this could be stated if you do choose to deny, and it's also referencing back to the state statute review criteria.
So why don't you, Matt, if you could flash up what the motion would look like to deny? We can read that into the record.
Sure thing, just a moment.
If it differs from what Commissioner Vero just said.
It differs in that it states the criteria. I can pull it up for us to see.
Okay.
Based on findings and facts of public testimony and staff report?
Along those lines.
Okay. I'll wait, yeah. Okay, so.
That's a lot lengthier.
It's a lot lengthier. Okay. I move that the request to adopt the resolution to rezone the property zoned CR3 with Canyon Gate Ole's planned variation to CC1 neighborhood commercial be denied based on public testimony, written comment, and the following conclusions. The request to rezone is not in substantial accordance with the goals of the neighborhood center land use designation of the Missoula County growth policy. And 2, the request to rezone allows uses that are not suitable for the character of the proposed district. And 3, the request to rezone does not encourage the most appropriate use of the land in the proposed district. The subject property for this denial is legally described as lots 5 through 11 and lots 16 through 26, block 19, East Missoula Addition, section 24, township 13 North, range 19 West, PMM, Missoula County, Montana.
And I will second that. Further discussion. I do see a hand that's been up for a while. Mr. Ferguson, is there something that you need to say that would be germane?
No, I'm trying to get my hand off. It went on accidentally.
Okay, your hand is off. Oh, it's all back on. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thanks everyone for participating and hanging with us this long. We truly value the input that folks have brought to the table on this. So our next public hearing, which we'll move into and I will open, is the Canyon River Subdivision Phasing Plan Amendment. Tim Worley.
Good afternoon, commissioners.
Oh, I can't. Can you hear Tim?
Barely.
Can you hear me now, commissioners?
A little bit better. Still a little weak.
Right. I'll bark.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. This is Canyon River Subdivision. It's an amendment of the phasing plan, a request from Paul Forsting of IMEG. Just a little bit of background on Canyon River. It was approved in 2001 as a county subdivision in 12 phases. It has since been annexed into the city, but any sort of plat adjustments or amendments, or like this phasing plan amendments, are fodder for you, county commissioners. 7 phases of the total 12 phases have been filed. And the phases that have not been filed are phases 8 through 12. What outstanding in the phases to be filed includes phase 11 in the southwest corner, and then phases 8, 9, and 10, sort of in the south central portion of the subdivision. And then phase 12 on the northern end of the subdivision. So the phasing plan amendment request is simply to switch things around a little bit, where the next phase to be filed would be phase 8. So that would be in the southwest corner. I think that's supposed to be phase 11 currently. And then phase 9 moves here. 9, 10, and 11 look like 8, 9, 10 did formerly. And then phase 12 is not proposed to change on the northern end. So just into the criteria for amending a phasing plan, we found that the modifications proposed comply with the regulations. They uphold the original Board of County Commissioners decision, The phasing plan will remain fully functional with these changes. Required changes for prior phases are complete or have been secured with financial guarantees. No changes are expected in the general area over the period of the phasing. And planning and provision of public facilities and services in the area of the subdivision will not be disrupted by phase timing. In conclusion, all the criteria for a phasing plan amendment have been met. Staff's recommendation is for approval, and commissioners, there's your motion. I move that the Canyon River phasing plan amendment be approved based on the findings of fact.
That is a very elegant and succinct motion compared to the last one. Is the applicant or applicant's representative here, and would you like to speak?
Yes, Paul Forsting, Territory Landworks, now IMEG. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. Everything's pretty straightforward on this application. It's it's a big project, and so when we get to these phases, we've done a lot of phasing amendments, and I mentioned this to some folks, and maybe some of the folks out in the public are wondering why you would amend the phasing plan. It's just such a large project. It was approved in 2000. And so we do appreciate the flexibility of changing the phases around to adjust to market conditions. We're changing, for whatever it's worth, this phase is the next phase that's going to be active is closest to the interstate, and so some smaller units compared to some of our other lots out there. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, which I will open. Is there any public comment on this proposed phasing plan? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Questions or a motion?
Nope, no questions. I move, well, gosh, Tim, I better make sure I have your succinct motion up there. I move that the Canyon River phasing plan amendment be approved based on the findings of fact.
I will second that. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'll open a public hearing on the Macaulay Meadows subdivision, and we will begin this with a staff report also by Tim Worley.
All right, commissioners, it's going to take maybe a minute for this PowerPoint to load. So I could start by saying that this is a request from TITAM LLC, represented by professional consultants for 14 lots on about 28 acres. Let's see here, we're ready to go. Also proposed as part of this subdivision is a 3.5 acre common area. No variances are proposed with this subdivision. The 28 acres are located in target range at the base of Macaulay Butte. There's an existing home on the property along with about 3 agricultural outbuildings. This is what the preliminary plat looks like. Again, 14 lots. Slopes on the property range from gentle, that's the yellow color you can see, to a little bit steeper slopes, that's the orange. Everything that's red is at least 20% slope. And the crosshatch areas are areas of 25% slope and greater. Here's some photos. The top photo looks southwest from Humble Road, or excuse me, southeast. You can kind of see the existing home and the agricultural outbuildings on the right-hand side of the photo. And then the lower photo is looking at that flatter portion of the property. Here's a photo looking at the home in a southwesterly direction, and the photo on the bottom shows those agricultural outbuildings looking due southeast. So commissioners, I'm going to go over the subdivision review criteria today, beginning with zoning and growth policy compliance. This is within the area of the 2010 Target Range Plan, which recommends residential uses at 1 home per acre on the gently sloped areas and parks and open space further up the slope. The 2019 Missoula area land use element recommends rural residential and small agriculture for the entire property. The Target Range Neighborhood Plan deems the property as being low suitability for residential development based on agricultural soils, its large acreage, its agricultural history, and a lack of municipal water and sewer. Now, referring to the Missoula area land use element, again, this is a designated rural residential and small agriculture with an intensity of up to 2 homes per acre. Agricultural uses can be primary or secondary to a residence per the land use element. Development should be designed to protect agricultural land as well as wildlife habitat and wildlife movement corridors. This property is within the area of the Target Range West End Rural Zoning District, which permits residential uses with a 1 acre minimum lot size. We found that this development complies with the zoning, but it does not comply with the growth policy. I should note that recommendations for the subdivision are not based solely on the growth policy. So on to agriculture and irrigation. Most of the northerly portion of the property is prime farmland if irrigated. That's not the case of the toe slope area that includes a portion of McCauley Butte further south. There is an irrigation ditch that runs through the property, and this property does have water rights. A 3.5 acre common area is proposed as part of this subdivision, where uses are restricted to agriculture. This location has access to irrigation. It does have traditional agricultural buildings on it at present, and one of those will be utilized within the 3.5 acres, and it's intended to be a working farm. Portions of the common area are steeper, however, with lower productivity soils. And within the property as a whole, there is an opportunity for more contiguous prime farmland acreage. The net acreage of the 3.5 acre common area actually ends up being about 2.66 acres. And we concluded that there will be a significant loss of over 10 acres of existing high quality agricultural soils as a result of this subdivision. And that restricting 3.5 acres, of which approximately 2.66 acres would be considered usable farmland for agriculture, does not reasonably mitigate the subdivision's potential adverse impacts to agriculture. And that adequate mitigation of adverse impacts would require subdivision redesign, essentially a new subdivision. So on to local services. There are a number of public roads in the area adjacent to the subdivision. Ringo Drive is on the eastern side of the subdivision, where Humble Road runs along the western edge of the subdivision. Ringo Drive is proposed to be extended through the subdivision and provide access to a majority of the subdivision lots. And Ponderosa Lane is the road that will provide access to the southern 5 subdivision lots. These roads meet county standards, and along these roads are walkways that are 8 feet in width, and those walkways also meet the subdivision regulations. So individual wells are proposed as part of this development. The entire development is limited to 10 acre feet of output per year, which requires a plan and approval by DNRC. And they've gotten initial approval from DNRC for their well layout. The irrigation ditch that runs through the property allows for irrigation on particular lots, and again, the common area, as I mentioned before. Well irrigation is outlined also in the plan, where they've limited themselves as far as landscape irrigation and as far as lawn watering to stay under that 10 acre-foot threshold. So individual septic systems are proposed as part of the subdivision, which differs from the previous proposal in 2018, which had a community drain field up on the hill slope. The individual drain field concept is supported by the health department, the water quality district, and city engineering, and is intended to include a future planned connection to a municipal system. Again, a 3.5 acre common area is proposed with the subdivision. What's required as far as the subdivision size and the size of the lots is actually closer to about 3/4 of an acre, at least just in the parkland dedication category. So parkland dedication is met with a 3.5 acre common area. Fire protection is in the form of 2 5,000-gallon cisterns with fire department connections. This is a design that was worked out by working with Missoula Rural Fire. There's been significant vegetation change over time on the property. The photo on the left shows, which dates back to about 1955, shows fairly sparse vegetation, which has grown up since the photo on the right, which is probably about 2017. Again, fire suppression has been reviewed by Missoula Rural Fire and has been given initial approval. There's moderate wildfire risk with this subdivision according to Missoula Rural Fire's review and what's been shown in what's called Appendix C. The Missoula County Sheriff's Office will be available to the subdivision from its 200 West Broadway location, which I think is 6-ish miles away from the subdivision. All right, on to impacts to the natural environment, wildlife, and wildlife habitat. This is a view of the 28 acres looking due south with Macaulay Butte in the background. You see the Bitterroot River, and if we advance a slide, here's this subdivided property, Macaulay Butte, Knife River Ponds to the east, and Blue Mountain Recreation Area further on. Here's Highway 93. There's a 278 acre conservation easement immediately to the south of the subdivision. The subdivision being located right here. The subdivision is also located adjacent to an open space cornerstone area. And open space cornerstones are areas with high open space value, and they contain a unique combination of resources and open space values. So Five Valleys Audubon commented on the subdivision, noting an updated understanding of bird migration patterns in Missoula in general. Southeast Missoula bird surveys have been undertaken where there was an estimated 1,300 individual birds representing 21 species. And in that location, which I believe was the Line Ranch further south, they noted that that area was significant stopover habitat where you have birds descending from migration altitude. Similarly, Five Valleys Audubon felt, although there's not been clear measurement in this location, that this is likely stopover habitat, that Macaulay Butte is likely stopover habitat. Some of the evidence for that being 210 species documented on those Knife River ponds directly to the east of the butte over a 4-year period. In addition to that, it's important to note that this is immediately adjacent to the Clark Fork River Grass Valley Important Bird Area. Here's the subdivision right here, and this is what's known as the IBA, or the important bird area, which is considered a bird conservation area of continental significance because of the species that are conserved within the area. And if we zoom out a little bit, there's target range here. Here's the extent of that important bird area, which stretches all the way to Houston. So Five Valleys Audubon noted that habitat that would benefit bird species includes overstory trees, grasslands, conifer edges, and open space. And some of these landscape elements are present within the subdivision, more on the butte and a little bit less further down on the flat portions of the property. Homes on the butte would shift bird use away from the area. And in some cases, the only buildable areas for those 5 lots on the southern edge of the property are on the southernmost portions of the property, which increases the impact. So our conclusions were that significant disturbance of wildlife habitat can be expected. Property size and proposed density offers opportunities to mitigate adverse impacts, but would require a redesign. Mitigation of the impacts to the natural environment and native vegetation would require significant changes to subdivision design and development restrictions that would require re-review. Just quickly going through some elements of public health and safety. Emergency services, water and sanitation are available to the subdivision. No build areas have been delineated, and again, those are the 25% plus slope areas. This proposal meets basic survey requirements per the Montana Subdivision and Platting Act. The developer has submitted a plat which does not comply with the requirements of the local subdivision regulations as pertaining to mitigation of adverse impacts. This proposal has followed the necessary application procedure and has been reviewed within the procedures provided in Chapter 5 of our subdivision regulations. Proposal meets requirements for utility easements and meets physical and legal access requirements. So just a summary of what we've heard on public comment, and a great deal of this has been attached to the staff report. Actually, the majority of public comment is attached to the staff report. We heard concerns about increased traffic, concerns about the impact of 5 homes on Macaulay Butte. Folks noted the value of being next to a large conservation easement. They highlighted impacts to agricultural land on the northern portion of the property. There were questions about Ringo Drive, which is being punched through over to Humble Road. Folks were concerned about view impacts with new homes up on the butte. Generally, individual septics as part of the design was seen as an improvement. There was a question about whether utilities could be placed underground and where is the dry laid sewer. That provides connection to a future potential municipal system. Planning Board heard the subdivision on October 6th, and they recognized the challenge of developing a property that has portions of Macaulay Butte as well as agricultural land. They recognized improvements since the previous submittal in 2018. They asked questions about unmitigated adverse impacts. What did staff think those impacts were? And again, those are impacts to agriculture, wildlife habitat, and the natural environment in our estimation. There was considerable discussion about whether there's a prescribed acreage that needs to be set aside for a project of this size, and there is not a set acreage. Again, the proposed acreage is 3.5 acres. In the end, the recommendation was unanimously for denial of the subdivision. And we did have a couple comments since Planning Board. One was received from Fred Stewart. who encouraged conservation design at this location, which could achieve the same number of lots with enhanced resource protection. This probably would require, however, an adjustment to the target range West End rural zoning district to allow for this to happen, which is something that's been discussed between Fred and the county and the community in general, I should say, out in target range. Housing should be on level ground or at the base of the butte, but no further than the base of the butte. Fred recommended a minimum 5 acres for the agricultural lot, and that a home should be allowed in conjunction with that it would just make for a more practical, cost-effective option for managing that land. And then just today, we heard from Brett Kalina. He noted that 5 of the proposed 14 lots are on the steep slopes of the butte, which is a cornerstone protected by a conservation easement. And he discussed his participation in a subdivision that allowed for that easement to be secured for Macaulay Butte. He noted the slopes, which include native grassland, that those will be impacted by the homes. Those slopes are at least 20%. And then hillside impact was a concern of his and was a consistent concern mentioned at neighborhood meetings for the subdivision. And we just received a letter from Terra Aquatic. It was received maybe an hour before the hearing. It's essentially an answer to Five Valleys Audubon comments with regard to impacts and impact mitigation. And it's actually a plan for active mitigation of impacts that were cited by Five Valleys. And I will let the developer's representative elaborate on those details. In summary, the recommendation coming from Planning Board and from staff is a denial of the subdivision. And commissioners, I'll be available for any questions you have.
Thank you, Tim. Would the applicant's representative like to present?
Yes. Yes.
Good afternoon.
We're down below there. Please, yes.
We see you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks for your time. I'm John Kellogg, for the record, with Professional Consultants, and I'm here with Andy Mefford. And we're on behalf of Dave and Tammy Keck presenting this subdivision proposal to you. Over the last 3 years, Dave has been talking to the neighbors about the various issues of developing this property and has been made aware, along with our planner, the late Dale, that there are opposing viewpoints on how to develop this appropriately. First of all, there are those who believe the agricultural land should be protected in whole. The Rangiches were using about 10 acres of the bottom land for hayland to grow hay. And so some folks said, well, that entire 10 acres should be protected. And so if we're to do any form of development, it should go up on the slopes, the lower slopes of the hill, but done carefully. Then the opposing perspective was from folks that said, no, the hill slope should be protected and the development should go down on the flat area similar to the surrounding subdivisions. So we're aware early on that what we need to find was a balanced approach to developing this property, one that would adequately protect the hill slopes, but would also devise a way of preserving the agricultural land on the property. So for initial guidance here for the baseline, we're looking at the zoning that Tim mentioned, the target range West End zoning district. And I'm going to bring up that.
I don't see the share screen. I was trying to, we got some slides and stuff here, and I'm trying to find how to share.
So there should be a menu bar. On my screen, it's up in the upper right-hand corner, and there should be next to the small microphone an icon with an up-facing arrow that is share screen. Alternatively, if you move your mouse around the screen, sometimes depending on what version you have, a menu will appear in the middle or lower part of your screen for Teams.
Did that come up?
Not yet.
Nothing yet. And when you hit the share screen icon, it should bring up a panel of options of what screens you have open on your
Yeah, I see the share content, but when I click it, okay.
Somewhere on that bottom. Well,
is the file open, Andy, that you want to share?
Yes, I see it here. I believe this will be.
There we go.
There we go. Yep.
Sorry about that. I haven't done a lot of these, so.
Okay.
Okay. As Tim had mentioned, the growth policies, and there are various growth policies, provide an overview and guidance for the governing body's decision, but they're in general terms, they're non-specific. And so up until the point that we submitted this final subdivision proposal, there were two subdivision proposals prior to that, one by the Rangiches and one later that we presented for Dave Keck. And in neither of those was there an indication that said, okay, to preserve agricultural land, you need to set aside X acres out of your 10 acres of what the Rangiches used to hay. So that's a general guide in the growth policy that we need to preserve agricultural land, but it's not specific. And likewise with the preservation of the hill slope up to the butte, it's a generalized guideline, it's non-specific, and it's left to us to propose something that will meet that requirement. Up until the time that we presented this subdivision, there was no specific guideline. The specific guideline that we have is incorporated into the Target Range West End Rural Zoning District. And within that district, the zoning permits on this particular 28-acre parcel, when you apply the hillside density reduction, would permit a potential of 21 units on this property. Now then, taking the next step, we would take the opportunities and the constraints specific to this parcel of land and determine out of the 21 potential sites what could be developed. What we've arrived at is a number that is just 2/3 of what the zoning allowable would be, after we have taken very great care to set aside a prime agricultural parcel and also carefully protecting the hillside by locating the building sites in a manner that will not disrupt the vegetation on the hillside to any great extent. So with the guideline of the zoning to start off with, we looked at, okay, how are we going to work at preserving the agricultural activity in a viable manner on this property? We had to look at a lot of local opportunities here to compare ourselves with what are viable farm, small farm operations in the area. And a little bit later on, Andy's going to go into this a little greater depth in the research that we undertook. So we said we're going to need a parcel that's got the access to the irrigation water. We're going to need a parcel that is actually entirely underlain, according to the soil survey. It's entirely underlain by the Grantsdale loam, the prime agricultural soil. There's a portion of it that has a little steeper, up to 10% grade on the upper side of above the ditch, but that is still Grantsdale loam. So all of our agricultural proposed parcel is underlain by Grantsdale loam. There's a little patch in another part of the subdivision that a previous soil analysis did for when the Rangiches proposed their subdivision. There's a little patch that's not prime ag land. It's a gravelly loam. We avoided putting that into our agricultural parcel because we wanted to make sure it was 100%. So what we believe we've done is identified the prime land of the prime agricultural land, a property that's got a barn that any farmer can use to store his equipment or store the hay that he grows or the other crops from the property. It's got access to the irrigation water, and it's the best portion of this subdivision to set aside for agricultural use. When we initially proposed this subdivision earlier this year, our common area, agricultural common area, was slightly smaller. It was 2.12 acres, and that inspired a response by the CFAC folks that they said, okay, we're looking at what you proposed, and we recommend that you would expand that acreage to include portions of the lots 8 and 9 on either side of that agricultural common area, to enlarge it to 3.5 acres. So we did that because that's the first indication through all of this process that we've gotten from anybody that said this is a target for the size of the parcel that you need to set aside for agricultural use. So we followed that proposal, and we took that and revised our subdivision application. The methods for preserving agricultural land are limited. With our previous subdivision proposal, we had used the clustering concept that Tim mentions in his staff report, and that is incorporated into the growth policy. And we used the plan variation to apply the clustering method. We discovered during the staff review of that proposal and during the your commissioners review of that proposal that the plan variation is not an acceptable way to set aside agricultural land preservation. So that is why what we did with this application is actually reduce the number of building sites, the number of lots proposed in the subdivision to accommodate our prime agricultural common area set aside. I don't know what slide. So, okay, that slide's good. Within the staff report, it's emphasized that we are not in conformance with the growth policy. And I know, commissioners, if you're like me, it becomes a little confusing in the layers of growth policies that we're looking at here. The growth policy includes at least 3 layers. One is the 2019 Missoula Area Land Use Element. Another is the open space plan that defines cornerstones. The third one is the 2010 Target Range Neighborhood Plan. And these plans are not really all in congruence with each other. There's a little bit of disconnect between them. The 2019 Missoula area land use element it identifies this parcel for rural residential and small agriculture. Now, the subdivision we're proposing, I would say, is a clear definition of rural residential and small agriculture. So I can't see how this would not be in conformance with that growth policy. Then moving on to the next growth policy, the open space plan of 2006, which identified cornerstones. In this slide, the cornerstone, you can see the peaks of the Macaulay Butte that are the cornerstone identified in that 2006 open space plan. But the definition of what's encompassed in that cornerstone is a rather amorphous delineation. Do you include everything way down to the very base of the hill? In that case, there are numerous developments that have already happened up to the base of the hill that we have a residence in our subdivision that exists within that portion of the hill. And there are approved subdivisions that we have mentioned. There's a subdivision at the east side of the Macaulay Butte that has been approved that also encroaches into the base of that slope. So our proposed building sites are all located below a third of the slope up to the Macaulay Butte. So our intrusion into this cornerstone is minimal at best. Furthermore, the open space plan of 2006 brings up a requirement that where the plan identifies an area as a potential additional cornerstone, it means a number of things, but it does not mean that development of the area will be prohibited. So within the open space plan that defined these cornerstones, it specifically says it's not to be a means for prohibiting development, which is what staff is intending to infer in their staff report. Moving on to the next growth policy, the target range plan, staff mentions the suitability analysis that was done for that plan. And this map here shows the suitability analysis that was incorporated into the plan. Now this analysis is a composite of a number of base maps, and the inference in the staff report is that one of the driving factors is prime agricultural land. Well, the red blocks that are unsuitable supposedly for development are not defined by the curved boundaries of prime ag land. They're defined by ownership patterns. And so what has been incorporated into the target range plan here, suitability analysis, is a downgrading in suitability of parcels that are over 2 acres in size that are undeveloped. It would seem to indicate then that rather than being a growth policy, this is a non-growth policy. It's a way of inhibiting development on developable land just because it's a large undeveloped parcel. So I think in total, looking at the various growth policies that have been brought up by staff, I think that I fail to see how our proposal is not in compliance with a growth policy. We are certainly rural residential and small agricultural. The other two plans seem to give negative points to larger undeveloped parcels and parcels that happen to be in the vicinity of a cornerstone, although that particular growth policy or that particular plan indicates that's not supposed to be a way of interpreting that plan. So finally, in the growth policy questions that have come up, here's a comparison of what the county's growth policy land use plan was before in 2017 and how it changed in 2019 and 2020 plans. In 2017, the green portion in that slide indicates land that's set aside for
parks and open
space. And in the revision that was done for the 2019 land use element, that boundary was changed to not include the property that we're dealing with. I would suspect that perhaps a driving force here in changing that was that those people who were pushing for the revision were understanding that by identifying this property for parks and open space, the property ownership, it would indicate that the county would, through some means, want to acquire that land for parks and open space, which would then further require either some sort of funding source or some way of redefining that ownership of the property. And so I think the reason that this plan was changed in the 2020 land or 2019-2020 land use element has to do with the fact that this ownership is not a priority and is something that is more acceptable under the rural residential designation that it found in that land use plan. So I think that's what I have to propose. I think we are in conformance with the growth policies, and I think what we're proposing offers an excellent balance between protecting the hill slope and preserving the prime agricultural land. And I'll let Andy continue to discuss the community infrastructure here.
A couple things I would like to point out, I guess. Ultimately, the recommendation for denial comes from the inability, perceivably, to mitigate against effects on agricultural and natural environment. I pulled back this slide just for the inference here that we can see this subject property where this little hand sign is the one now being viewed as unsuitable, largely based on.
Andy,
Yep.
is there any way that you can blow that up a bit or expand it? I'm sorry, I'm a couple inches away from the screen and I'm having problems looking at it. Unless is it in our packet?
No, I don't believe it is.
Okay, okay. Sorry. There should be like a plus sign or expansion sign. I'm sorry. I'll just listen. Go ahead. I don't want to waste your time. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I wish I.
We wish we were more technologically informed.
Yeah, all I'm getting is the little hand sign that just lets me go through the slides.
No worries.
Okay. The point I was making with this slide is, and it comes back to the issue of this one is deemed not able to mitigate, non-approvable, and it's in a red area. About 18 months or so, we were able to approve this 5-acre parcel in the red area as well. Not to mention this parcel here in large red at the base of the butte, an isolated parcel, was also found to be approvable against these same plans. The other thing I would like to point out in this and our subdivision here is, the overlying picture is it's been zoned. It's been zoned 1 per acre. This land use plan, this 2019 plan, as you all know, was well vetted through public processes, public hearings, public comment, and we modified the plan. The public has came and the choice was made to modify this and effectively move that line back and push it up the butte. So there's been great effort to create this boundary, and for whatever reasons it was modified that enlarged the function on this property to rural and small ag. So just a couple points I wanted to make. I'll be quick on these because there was a lot there. This is just a kind of a proximity map to the subdivision, pointing out the proximity to a number of regional amenities, schools, parks, little league ball fields, open space, walking paths. I think it kind of speaks for itself. Another one here also showing some greater picture to the Clemens Path, school accessibility. You can see the surrounding development pattern with our project line here again at the base of the butte. Those are those 2 subdivisions that I mentioned earlier on the red slide, if you will. That blows it up a little bit more where you can see the subject parcel. That's a recommendation for denial for those issues. This is the 5 acres that was identified in here. I guess that's actually a 10. That red covered this 5, which was approved, and this is an adjacent 5 to the south. And then this is the miners edition. That's just a snapshot again of that. This highlights the subject miners edition subject parcel that was approved for 120 plus units, as I recall. And you can see there was some utilization of development on the lower lands. I actually haven't pulled it up. It might be prime farmland. I'm not sure. Honestly, I didn't pull it up. Knowing the extent of prime farmland out there, it wouldn't be surprising that it wasn't. And then you can see it also then creeps up on the base of the butte. This is a snapshot. There's a couple slides here. This is a snapshot of a photo with you can see these red boxes. These are probably the 2 building areas that get the most attention. You can see here where the hand is, you can barely see the existing house. It's a lower on the hill. These home sites are about 60 feet above, but they're still got some screen in front of them. The other 2 home sites are off the end of this road that are on the lower reaches in these scattered pines. The elevation of this building site relative to these lower ridge lines is 100 to 120 feet still below the ridge line. It's some 220 feet below the ultimate peak of the butte. So those are just a couple illustrative slides. There's also a question about the natural environment and vegetation. This is a map I found from 2004 that was an inventory of the butte property. Our property resides right in here. And all of these areas, as you can see on the legend, is identifying a scattering of all over this property of various levels of noxious weeds and various concentrations from trace to high and a number of noxious weed species. So the butte has some, measures of noxious weeds like most of the hillsides do. So it's not just entirely a pristine site that has no imperfections, I guess. This is a couple snapshots I had in the slideshow for the presentation to the planning board. This is actually that 5-acre parcel I mentioned earlier called Macaulay Acres that had the red square over it. Was approved recently with prime farmland. This is the subject parcel. This is also a snapshot, some reaches of the miners edition. I'm going to pull up another slide and get into the ag a little bit more. It will be pretty brief, and then I'm going to turn over to Lynn and let her speak to some of the natural environment concerns. I will introduce her.
Okay.
I'm on the technical aspect now of trying to. You probably don't see that screen, I guess, right?
Yep.
No, we see it.
Oh, you do? Sweet. I'm just going to highlight some of this. I put this down. The first bullet point just points out the fact of, and we saw the first and second bullet point points to this issue. It's the process. There currently are no quantitative guidance documents that exist for how much is enough in the ag preservation land. It's subjective and it's qualitative, not quantitative. We've seen the planning board struggle immensely with that. They felt for the developer in this case who went to the great extent, reached out to Garden City Harvest, a number of people to try to find ways to mitigate. And we get to the 11th hour and find out we're recommended for denial. It was much worse in the first subdivision than this one, but it wasn't until, after this subdivision goes through extensive process, extensive time, extensive money spent, we don't learn till early September that the staff is recommending either denial or a no opinion, which I've never even heard of. So it was a big struggle, and we and the developers spent extensive time trying to understand that and trying to balance hillside versus flat. Another thing that, if Missoula County was truly about preservation of ag land, there really is much more effective tools through ag land zoning or other things. In my limited research and things, that indicates parcel size a minimum of 40 acres, if not 80 acre size, for effective true agricultural set-asides. Missoula County attempted, as you're all aware, to adopt some kind of guidance document, and it was ultimately not rejected. It couldn't be passed. On this following slides, I'll just blow through them pretty quickly, but I went and found 12 examples of farms ranging from about 0.6 to about 4 acres in size, with an average of 2.5, ranging from, vegetable crops, fruits, flowers, hops, stock. Was a few examples done with traditional and organic methods. I also spent a great deal of time going around. I went to Benson's Farms. I went to a number of individuals to try to find the question and answer the question, is this parcel viable? Is it usable? I got at least three people that identified it is very usable. It's prime ag land with the barn, with the proximity to irrigation. One of the retailers even said he's got a similar size parcel, 3 acres, that he's turning $1 million a year out of. So the size, no one ever said it's too small, it's not big enough. At least 2 of the people I talked to were interested in pursuing that lease that we're proposing. So there is definite interest to move forward with this. We have, rather than a lot of times in the subdivision, the ag land set aside, you find a lot of time is the area that had high groundwater, had drainage problems, was a septic system. This one here these are viable lots. These could have been lots, could have met the zoning requirements on density, and there are 3 effective lots that are being given away. We've made that comment about the common area. We've got 359% more common area than was required. There's this deduction about our 3.5 acres only being 2.66. 0.5 acres, half an acre, 15% of it is tied up in road easements. That is going to be unusable. I guess the value of that, it provides good access on both sides so you can get to the land, you can use it. There's a deduction for the irrigation canal and its easement. That's that's the heart of the facility, and it's being used, that 1/1500 of an acre is being used effectively to try to reduce us to the net, to try to discount it as it's not usable. Some of the areas tied in utility easements, which again does not stop its inability to farm. The slope land was only about 10%, and you'll see one of my examples, there's nothing stopping some diversity and utilization of the property to farm and put a half acre of 10% lands to functional use. And 62% of it is totally unencumbered flatlands. There's 10.9 acres north of the ditch, as you'll see in a following slide. We're setting aside 3.5, or almost 30% of that land is being preserved. So this concept of losing 10 plus, I don't understand where we get that 10 plus. It's definitely south of 10 acres. There's at least 1 ag building. There are 2 others that I'm sure the client would be willing. There's two structures that sit on that parcel. Definitely, one crosses a line. So, I mean, those structures could, that could have more than 1 structure, I think. In summary here, that I noted that there's that 30% is given up in prime soils. It's got access to infrastructure.
It's viable. I have personally vetted that with a number of people. Here's that slide that I put up that shows the tracing of, I traced on Google Earth the ditch that runs along here and the boundary line to find the 10.9 acres. This jumps into some of the properties I looked at was the Orchard Gardens. That project sets on a total of 4.6 acres, but there's 1.5 acres in gardens that you can see here identified. I went around and traced out the area being used for ag. That equates to 1.55 acres. The youth farms shows here at 2 acres. The River Road Farm System, it shows it at 3.75. Again, based on me going through and clipping out their building and parking lots and other areas, I find about 2.4 acres in production farms. This was one I actually found. I was just looking because I've got another one's called Sweet Road Farms, but it was in Grass Valley, California. As you can see, there's sloping variety here where they're growing flowers and other things on. This was, I think they mentioned here, 3-acre farm. This is one in the Hamilton that they are cultivating vegetables, herbs, and flowers. It's a small acreage, 2.5 acres. County Rail Farms out of Mullen Road. There's about 3.4 acres in production. There's also flowers involved with this one here.
And Andy, I think we're getting the gist of what you're trying to point out here. So if you could move on a little bit and hopefully get to the mitigation memo that was distributed late in the day.
Sure. Well, I'll finish right quickly with the Frank's Little Farms at 0.6. Pink Grizzly's on about 285. The Big Sky High School is running about 4 acres in ag. I also pulled in a couple others. This was the 3 acres in hops. Here's a 1/2 acre micro farm, and that's another example of the county rail. So I think the point of it is you know that we're given almost 30% of the ag land is being converted with infrastructure, and it is usable. It's viable, and so we feel that's adequate mitigation. I guess then the other one is the other hot button here is the one on the natural environment. And with that, I hope Lynn is still on the call and can pick up from there. I'm trying to figure out how to get back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, there you go. Was that sort of an introduction or to?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Lynn Bacon. I am principal of Terraquatic LLC in Bozeman. I do conduct avian ecology studies. I am a professional wetland scientist. And of course, I have to dabble around in botany and anything birds. And I attend local Audubon meetings. I was very interested in this project. When Andy called me, I was a little concerned. There's no way I would ever want to crosswise with any Audubon society. But I read the letter and thought, well, let me look at this and see what's going on, see what the Audubon has their concerns about, and looked at some aerials and started to work with Andy and his crew on development issues. I also work for one of my clients is the city of Bozeman, and I analyze watercourse regulations in view of subdivisions proposals. So I'm pretty well adept at dealing with subdivisions, working with nonprofits, environmental conservation issues. I wear a lot of different hats. So when Andy sent me the first drawings, I said, "Where's your cut and fill slopes? We need to see all that. We need to see. I want to see exactly what's going on." Read the letter from the Audubon, and it looked like their major concern, of course, has to do with habitat loss. It is technically adjacent or on the line of an important bird area, but for all purposes, I'm going to say it's in the IBA, because really the Macaulay Butte, the whole thing should be in an IBA, really, just because it's on the edge of it and not officially included. It doesn't look it anyway. but that's a moot point. Being a scientist too, reading the letter, I noticed that, you know, they did bring up areas that were quite far from the site and based some of their suppositions on what was going on 5 miles away or southeast Montana. I'm sorry, southeast Missoula and at the Knife River ponds. So, I mean, technically, I understand that kind of language and that kind of those kind of hypotheses, if you will. But the point being is that we don't have any survey data here, but for all intents and purposes, I agree, this area likely serves as an important stopover area, likely some important breeding areas. So from that standpoint, I wanted to see if I get my head wrapped around what was going on in the site, and then proceeded to ask Andy to, you know, get down to brass tacks here and start, you know, where are your house lots, drain fields, where are your driveways, fill slopes. In other words, what I was trying to get at is what does this site really offer for stopover and breeding? And what it looks like, you know, it's only a quarter mile from the Bitterroot River air mile. It's only 1 to 1.2 miles from the confluences of the Clark Fork. And there's a real prominent connectivity issue here with all the conifers. Most of them are conifers. Most of them are pea pines with some inclusions of Douglas fir. Not much young generation on this map that's up in front of us now. I had his staff go out and count this, you know, just in general size diameter. I didn't have them, you know, do official diameter breast height, but they went out and did that. I visited the site for a couple hours last week. Grasslands. There's a lot of smooth brome and orchard grass. There's some native fescues and native Chardonneret in there. There's a few serviceberry and chokecherry. So I started contemplating with this. I believe the issue is this connectivity, and I think it's super important. So I asked them to tabulate how many trees would definitely be taken out of here, and in general, what size ranges. I was just kind of curious about the size range, and then what trees might be taken out. And in the upper right-hand corner, we have, I can't see it because it's really small, but it's like 30 some odd for positive total removal, and maybe a possible removal, another 30. So I proposed to Andy that we come up with a landscaping preliminary proposal, if you will. Where can we plant trees to reconnect this line of primarily ponderosa pine that leads on down toward the river? So the purple are replanting of conifers, and I'd like to throw in a few deciduous trees down by the boulevard.
Can everyone see what Lynn's talking about? I just wanted to make sure it's not
pretty small.
No, it's small enough that we can't quite see it.
Can you full screen it? Are you sharing Lynn's screen?
We can see red and yellow dots and some purplish dots up along the roadway up above.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure because there was a reference, and I wasn't sure if I had lost screen share.
Okay. So the purple dots are replanted. They would be irrigated. It would be a 2-to-1 replanted to removal. Now, what I asked Andy is if it would be too hard to irrigate up along the upper area of the project site up on the hillside, you know, could we have, you know, maybe come up with another corridor that we could connect? And he mentioned perhaps the boulevard, and I asked him, you know, ask your client which one he wants to do. And I was quite taken aback when he said, I want to do both of them. So I was really pleased, actually. I thought that was great, and I was just really excited about that. Indeed, the trees along the boulevard are evenly spaced. It's just one of your typical, but I'm going to work, you know, when we do a more formal landscape, if the project does go through, I'd like to naturalize that a little bit and throw in some deciduous trees in there, ones that the county likes to see along their boulevards. That'll increase bird diversity. While we are out there too, I noticed there's a sheet fence around the east, west, and north sides of the property. And I asked Andy to ask his client, you know, what do you think? Can we take that out? We saw a lot of deer up there. I don't like sheet fence personally. I'm not sure if the fence is there to protect the other property up on the butte, the conservation easement. But that's something that the landowner can talk to him about. But I'd like to see the fence out, and he was completely amenable to it. If the other landowner wants, you know, post with nice private property signage could be put up there. And we can put some bird boxes, bluebird boxes, kestrel boxes. They're all amenable to all those ideas. So I'm really pleased how this group is really trying to mitigate for disturbance to this corridor, this important corridor. You know, it's not my job to tell someone, no, you can't build on this hillside. My job is to help someone try to figure out whether it's working with wetlands or any kind of wildlife issues, try to figure out how to mitigate disturbances. You know, of course, there are certain people that I refuse to work with if they disobey laws, et cetera, and so forth. But I'm just trying to tell you that I'm quite pleased, and the disturbances, if this project is built out, are mitigatable. There's a couple issues here, just in full disclosure. There's a couple drain fields in the steep part right here and right here that I just noticed.
Quite sure where you are, Lynn.
Did you see my pointer?
No.
Oh, it's Andy. Can you point to lots 13 and 12 up above the yellow trees? Well, upslope of the yellow trees is a rectangle. And
oh, I see. Well, okay, I'm looking at another map, but 13 and 12, gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
And they're right, and I don't know if you can see, there's a rectangle above like the middle yellow trees. And that's a drain field. That's the house lots are down on the flats in those two sites. So it's something, just full disclosure, I just want to, you know, that's something I'll talk to Andy about. I don't know why the drain fields are upslope from the houses, but those we'd like to declare as no build areas where it's really steep, and get those defined and puts a definition into the covenants as far as, you know, no build means, you know, no fences, no trails, no gardens, no debris, et cetera, and so forth. So in a nutshell, I'm with this group. They're really trying hard. They're doing what I asked them to do, which I'm really pleased about. And I especially, you know, we want to please the Audubon Society, and I'm a supporter of the society. So
thanks, Lynn.
You're welcome.
Andy or John, concluding remarks before we move into public comment.
I think the main conclusion is there are two criteria. It's the effects on ag and the natural environment. And as Lynn pointed out, we've reached out when we learned of these issues were unmitigatable. I actually reached out to the Audubon Society. It's kind of frustrating in the process that the letter is written in April, and we do not see that letter being a denial. There's no indication that that's going to be a basis for denial. We learned this in September and then get the importance of it, and we're left to scramble at the end to see if it's mitigatable. And I think, as Lynn has shown, the effects on the natural environment is certainly mitigatable. I know in the first subdivision submittal, Dale had put an extensive amount of energy in working with Garden City Harvest and anyone out there who could find someone to partner or take over this ag component. And we've made another attempt, I guess, again, to show that there is interest, it is viable, and we have mitigated for the impacts to ag, I think, is the takeaway of that. And it's compliant with zoning and the land use plan.
And we're not asking for any variances.
And no variances.
Thank you, John and Andy.
Thank you.
We will open it up for public comment. As with previous public hearings this afternoon, I would ask folks to keep their remarks as succinct as possible. Thanks for hanging with us all this time. Everyone gets one shot at commenting. Try not to be redundant and be respectful of other folks in the process. And we will begin with Brett.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the time. I did post in some written comments, but I was able to make the meeting, so I thought I would speak as well. Very quick history on this is...
And Brett, could you state your full name for the record?
My name is Brett Kalina. I live at 4850 Humble Road, just down from this property. I was one of the original partners that put the 278 acres of conservation easements together back in 2006, 2007. I'm intimately familiar with this property, and I've lived in the area for 16 years. And I'm here to advocate for the open space. And when we had several community meetings about this before, I even reached out to the Kecks, introduced myself, said I am ready to support anything you do on this property as long as you don't put houses and roads up on the butte. And they have never, since that point, ever reached out to me. And over the years, I've tried to work with Dale at PCI and say, hey, listen, one of the key assets to this area is Macaulay Butte. The value of that to the neighborhood is immense. And I have gone from no houses up on the butte to, hey, can you bring the houses below the existing house? They had no movement there. Can you put in deed restrictions, buffer zones to our conservation easement property? Can you put in building envelopes? They have never done that. And I'm just amazed is that, you know, we now have this hired environmental consultant from Bozeman who has got these mitigation for the Audubon Society. But the real negative impacts of this development are the 5 lots that are up on the butte. And these are 20 to 25 degree slopes. I'm a real estate developer and a home builder. This is not where houses belong, because with those houses, and as was pointed out, especially lot 10, the only tiny spot of lot 10 that is below 25 degrees in slope is right up against our fence line. And so the house will have to go there, and houses come with driveways and garages and outhouses and green irrigated lawns and green septic system drain fields that show up against a natural brown native grassland. These 5 lots will destroy the north side of Macaulay Butte. And I'm going to try to go through this very quickly because I don't want to be repetitive, but PCI has just made some bizarre claims to equate this to the Miners Edition, which I was the original developer of with some partners. We had 300 acres, and prior to getting approval for the Miners Edition, we permanently protected 93% of that property, 278 acres of the 300 we own, that was all buildable up on the butte, riverfront property. We permanently protected it with an independent 5 Valleys Land Trust, so that's going to be protected forever. And it's a great thing, because when 2009 came up, our development went belly up. That development is never getting built. I don't own the property anymore, but I'll go to my grave knowing that I protected it for the rest of my life, because we had independent people protecting it. This development has no deed restrictions, and they talk about these covenants and none of that's ever been presented. And we really pushed with Dale, like, can you give us a 50-foot buffer zone on the fence? And they can't, because if they do that, then they can't build right up there against the fence line. So all of a sudden, this 11th hour mitigation efforts from this woman from Bozeman, while I appreciate that, trying to satisfy the Audubon Society or trying to figure out the right acreage for a small farm to satisfy CFAC, while those are great organizations, to date, no one has ever tried to mitigate the impacts to the open space, which is the true highest value of Macaulay Butte. The entire neighborhood, the entire valley floor sees this. The Kecks have plenty of developable property on this. And I want to quickly just bring up one point. The former owners of this property, the Rangiches, when we put our conservation easements on with Five Valleys, they were all on board to protect the slopes of the property, and they put forth a development that was 14 1-acre lots on flat ground, made everyone happy. I was in full support of it. The traditional family that owned this property, they were the ones that should have profited it from developing this property, and they got so frustrated that they wound up selling it off, and the Kecks bought this knowing this property was going to be tough to develop because it is such an important piece. And instead of learning from that, what PCI has advised them to do is, let's not ask for variances. Let's break this down to just the baseline, you know, no frills, no outside the box thinking. And this is what we get 12 years later. But it is nothing in their proposal acknowledges the decades of people that fought to protect Macaulay Butte, which will now be protected long after we're all dead, because we put protections in it. There's no protections for the farm ground. I'll tell you, we try to farm out here. We've looked for people to farm ground. We've looked for people to cut hay. It's very difficult. So when these homes go in and there's this little farm of 2 or 3 acres, which is wonderful, but there's no deed restriction that says it'll always be that. If they can't find someone to lease this, it's not going to be a farm, and then it'll be an eyesore for these people that have spent a lot of money to build nice houses out there. This property has developable ground, and the PCI to try to turn this into, well, let's fight about it. Is it protection of farm ground or protection of open space? The developers are trying to please everyone. I think when you say that you've reached a balance, I totally disagree. I think you are ruining the hillside and you're not protecting the farm ground. There's a lot of ways to develop this property and make a lot of money doing it and please everyone, but you are not hitting it with this. So in closing, all I will say is to protect open space is important. And once you put the houses up there, I don't care how many bird boxes you put on the fence posts or how many trees you plant on the boulevard, you've ruined it. You get one shot. And what's going to happen is if these 5 lots up there get created, then the people that buy those will be entitled. They'll say, I just spent a couple $100,000. Of course I want a green lawn. Of course I want an outbuilding and a garage and a dog kennel and all the stuff that comes with houses that they'll be entitled to have. And it will ruin the north side of the Butte. So these developers have heard from you guys before. They've had unanimous denials at the planning board. Do something to mitigate the open space problem. And you do that by not building on the hillside. These are 25-degree slopes. They're not the right place to build houses. So
Thanks,
I thank you for your time, and I urge you to follow the lead of the planning board for the 3rd time and deny the subdivision and push the developers to develop the appropriate portions of the property. Thank you very much.
And just for clarification, I think at one point, Brett, you mentioned outhouses, and I think outbuildings. There better not be any outhouses on this property. I can tell you that.
Well, I'll tell you, there will be septic fields, and the one thing I will quote,
Brett, we really need to move on. We've got a bunch of folks queued up here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, if folks can keep their comments to 3 minutes or less, we've got a number of people in line. So next, Annie Graham.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Annie Graham, and last month my family purchased the property that's between this proposed subdivision and the Knife River Ponds. The portion of Macaulay Butte that's visible from town and from Fort Missoula is located on our property, and that's the conservation easement property that we've been talking about. I also own a house at 2690 Two Rivers Lane, And this particular piece of Macaulay Butte, the subdivision that we're talking about, is the view from my house. It is a spectacular view, and it's a big part of why we bought a house in that neighborhood. We are not property developers, and I know the minors addition was originally approved for our property. I don't know anything about property development, but I know that it's been referenced repeatedly in these discussions. And the minors addition is not part of our future plan for the property. But however, as part of the subdivision process, as Brett did mention, the former owners of our property placed nearly all of Macaulay Butte in conservation easement for scenic value. And clearly everybody recognizes the scenic value of that piece of property. I really appreciate the effort that they put into making this a reality. And the value of that land as open space is really what drew us to purchase that piece of property. So most of the people who live in the target range area look out of one window or another of their house, and they have a view of Macaulay Butte. And it's a little bit different from what the rest of town sees. What they're seeing is basically going to become lots 10 through 14 in this proposed subdivision. Like I said, it is a spectacular view. I love it so much. It is about to become, if this subdivision were approved, it would become lots in this subdivision. Since our purchase of Macaulay Butte, we have been hiking over there regularly. I think it's really hard to tell from these maps, and I think it's these maps and some of the pictures that have been taken are a little bit misleading, but it's really hard to tell just how this piece of property is.
Andy, are you trying to share your screen with us?
No.
Oh,
no, just the maps that have been shown and that people have been talking about throughout the when we were reviewing the property earlier. I think it's just a little bit misleading. It is an incredibly steep piece of property. And when we say this property is just the bottom part of Macaulay Butte, it's just not true. Lots 13 and 14 go almost to the top of Macaulay Butte. And I understand that there may be restrictions on building houses, but as Brett pointed out, there are other things that can be built on those properties, and it is going to change the way this looks forever for the entire target range area. So I'd be happy to take anyone for a hike out there if you'd really like to see it for yourself. I really think these pictures are misleading, and they don't do this whole thing justice. So I just really wanted to share my feelings with you and encourage you not to approve this subdivision as it's proposed. It would absolutely destroy the scenic view of Macaulay Butte for most people in the target range area, and it would have a permanent negative impact on an iconic open space in Missoula. So much work has already been done to conserve this amazing piece of the landscape, and it'd just really be unfortunate if this subdivision were able to have such a negative effect. So thanks for letting me voice my opposition to this portion of the subdivision that's on Macaulay Butte.
Thanks, Annie. Next person, Jim Brown.
Thank you. I think I'm on now, right? Can you hear me?
We can hear and see you.
There's been so much said, I hardly know where to begin. But let me say that Tim Worley did a good job of outlining the bird impacts. I would like to expand a little bit on that and explain why Macaulay Butte is important bird habitat. And a lot of it has to do with where it lies along our river corridor, the Bitterroot Corridor. And it is in the important bird area, which has a very high diversity of bird species. This is something that's quite significant. In the last couple of years, we just learned a lot about why we have this important bird or the high bird diversity. And it has a lot to do with what we've learned about the migration of birds through the so-called Night Flight Project. That's a nonprofit that has recorders set up all through the Bitterroot Valley, and Five Valleys Audubon put one up not very far from the meadows, from the Macaulay Meadows. What we are learning from all this is that thousands and thousands of birds are migrating in the fall through the Missoula Valley on down in through the Bitterroot Valley. Come daylight, half hour before daylight, these birds sit down, many of the songbirds, and they rest and refuel. Later in the day, some of them may begin to migrate on, but they do this in a very fine-grained hopscotch manner. They don't get up high and fly. They want to avoid predators. So habitat along this corridor is really important for migratory birds, and we get a tremendous number of species that migrate through this valley. The other thing about Macaulay Butte is it is a very special habitat niche in the greater Missoula Valley and a very important part of that river corridor. So I'll just say a couple things more specific. When we made our comments, we recommended that lots 10 and 11 definitely shouldn't be allowed. And
Jim, just to enter momentarily, by your comments, do you mean individual or are you representative of the Audubon Society?
I'm representing the Five Valleys Audubon, and okay. Our comments were sent by Five Valleys Audubon earlier. So in those comments, we recommended that lots 10 and 11 definitely shouldn't be allowed. The other three lots we thought were a form of mitigation for the whole area, and so we didn't suggest they be taken off, partly because they had slopes too steep to build on. But let me also point out that one reason that we're very concerned about this butte and the need to protect it is it isn't just the habitat loss along the base of the lot that's counted. It's a disturbance from the activity of people. And some bird species are very sensitive to bird disturbance, which is noise and activities of people. So the best thing would be to not try to develop the lower part of Macaulay Butte. It is important habitat, and it's a part of a very important corridor of bird migration and other animal life in the Missoula Valley. So that's about summarizes it.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Andy, would you mind stop sharing your screen? And as much as I love to look at the rear end of Subarus, alternatively, Tim Worley, would you mind, as we're just having this conversation, pulling up the plat of the subdivision just so that we, as folks are commenting, we have a visual of what it is that we're talking about here.
Or maybe can you pull up the plat? Well, I mean, I'm looking at it in our packet, but the slope analysis that shows the colors of the slope, and then also
stop sharing. Before it said stop share.
Oops, sorry.
Did you find that?
My screen.
We still see it. If you go to share content, it should give you an option of hiding share. While we're messing around with that, next at bat is Paul Ferguson.
Yeah, my name's Paul Ferguson. I've lived in the area for 34 years at the end of Glen Drive. And the view from Glen Drive is quite different from the view of the end of Humble. You can see where these houses are going to be. But not only the top 5 houses, but not only the houses, the roads, outbuildings that go along with them, and the traffic. Already traffic is a problem with all the traffic south of Sundown comes down to Glen Drive. And the surface there is all crushed up and fractured. And the county isn't going to do anything about it. All the heavy equipment to any building site comes down right past our front door. And also the number of cars flying around the corners are a big risk. A neighbor and I were talking about this. We are both too close to Sundown, when Rangage 3 was put in, it cut our driveways too close to sundown, and a stop sign was supposed to stop stuff on sundown before it came around. But Horace Brown, in his wisdom, put the stop sign the other way. The view will be destroyed by all these houses. And part of the way of life that we came to live there for is to see the open space. And we don't need urban sprawl up the side of the butte. So I would encourage you to send this back to the developer. It's just not going to work. The flat part is fine. The original Rangage development of 5 acres on each side and Ringo Drive running through to Humble seemed reasonable. Stayed out of the high park, gave 3.5 acres for agriculture, a road going into it, but Ringo Drive didn't match up with Schwenk Court. Now the other end of Ringo didn't match up with Glen Drive. It's got a seg onto Sundown, and that's a kind of bad corner. So thank you for the opportunity to say this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. I am going to run through some phone numbers here that are listed that I do not know if they are representative of folks who whose names are listed or if you're even interested in commenting, but I will read out the last 4 digits of your phone number. If you want to testify, feel free to, or not, and I'll just move on. A number ending in 0400. How about 19?
Hello, that's me.
Oh, yes. I can.
Hi, 0400. Had a little trouble unmuting. My name's Webb Harrington, and we live on Schwenk Court, pretty close to the development. And I've gone to most of the meetings pertaining to this subdivision. And although the developers have made some changes, I think they're missing the point from the neighborhood. The last 2 gentlemen that spoke and the owner around the corner pretty much summed up my view is building the 5 lots that they're trying to develop on the butte kind of negates all the hard work they've done, because they shouldn't be building up on the butte for multiple reasons. They initiated this with putting a septic system on the butte. I think that the butte should be protected, not only because of the view, but the wildlife. And so I kind of like Rankage's first attempt at subdividing. They were respectful of both and the neighborhood. It seemed to be a better fit. So that's all. I just would hope that they wouldn't put homes on the butte, because it is rather steep. And although they say they're not going very far up the butte, they truly are. Thank you for letting me chime in.
You bet. Thank you for participating. Next, we have a phone number ending in 1949. If you, oh, there we go. Would you like to speak to this? We cannot hear you. It looks like you're unmuted. So if this is 529-1949, please state your name if you'd like to add your comments. We are having some problems hearing you. So if you wanted to type anything into the chat to let us know who you are, let's figure out how we can get you on the line. In the meantime, let's go forward to 549-9017. Okay. Apparently you do not want to testify. Yeah, we have.
Now?
We have you. Is this who do we have on the line? Yeah, please introduce yourself.
My name is Leslie Della Piazza. So I did the *6, which was unmuting me from your program. I, however, did not unmute myself on my iPhone.
Can you hear?
That was the problem. As usual, the technical difficulty was
hello.
User.
Oops. Hey, hang on, sir. I'm sorry. We've got two folks talking at the same time. We'll take this first caller and then get to you. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. Is it Leslie?
Yes, Leslie Della Piazza.
Okay.
I live at 2925 Humble Road, directly across from the Macaulay Meadows proposed subdivision, and have also been a part of the neighborhood meetings and public meetings, and was at the county public meeting when the original, I don't know if it was the original KEC or TITAM development was denied. I first want to acknowledge, I know it's been a very difficult process for the KECs, and also just say I'm sorry to hear about Dale's passing. But that said, I'm on the call because I really echo the sentiments of, I'm sorry, a little too much. All the sentiments of the people who are, you know, intent on saving the butte. That's true for me too. I'm looking at it out my window right now, and I respect the right of the developers to be able to develop the property and recoup their investment and make some return. And I want to be supportive of something that, you know, and everybody has things that bother them, whether it's traffic or water quality. All of the concerns are valid. And I just am in such agreement that, you know, we can't ever fix the butte once it gets messed up. And it's great that it also supports bird habitat. I'm pleased that there's something quantifiable or something that, you know, the broader community cares about as well. And of course, none of us are out here prepared to purchase the butte from the KEC so that they don't, you know, feel the need to develop it. But it just would be good if there was some sort of, since there's such a broad recognition of its value, it would be good if we could look for a way to use community resources to help protect it. You know, if 270 acres of it has already been set aside, it seems so manageable to figure out a way to set aside the remainder that's available currently for setting aside. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Next in the queue, caller at 9017.
Yes, this is Fred Stewart.
Oh,
and
hi.
I'm at 40. Hi. Technology is an issue. 4675 South Avenue West in Missoula. And I'm the owner of Green Bench Orchard. It's about 3.5 acres of apples and raspberries. So I had a number of comments. I sent them in as written comments, and I'll just very briefly mention a couple of those things for the rest of the folks to hear. That in terms of the ag parcel, I believe very strongly for that to be successful, it has to be somewhat larger, and it has to be sold to someone, not a lease or not common area, because my experience has been that it requires a lot of work, effort, money to build the infrastructure for agriculture. And if you're leasing it and someone decides they don't want to lease it anymore, you have lost all of that. So my recommendation is that the ag parcel be sold to an individual at a reasonable price and allow for a home to be built there so that you have somebody with an incentive to do the right type of farming. Restrictions could be put on it so you don't have a hog farm or other things that would not fit in with the area around it. The other main thing that I wanted to mention was that in the Target Range Neighborhood Plan, there's a recommended zoning change for this area that would talk about conservation design when subdivisions are put in that would allow for less than a 1 acre parcel when conservation design principles are used. I believe that it's possible to have a larger ag parcel, get the lots off of the hillside, and still have as many buildable lots for the developer if they would use conservation design, and it could be done very nicely. Not everyone wants or needs a 1 acre lot, and I understand that that's the zoning right now, but the 1 acre lot requirement is modified in the proposed zoning in the neighborhood plan whenever the commissioners get around to dealing with that. And I believe that the half-acre parcel with conservation design is something that the community would support under the current zoning. And that's enough for now, and I know you've seen my written comments, commissioners. Thank you for taking this on, and I oppose the subdivision as it is currently submitted. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who has not commented yet who would like to? And if so, please raise your hand in the menu bar. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and open it up to questions and discussion on the part of the commission. Commissioner Vero, questions or comments?
No, I'm sorry. What was the original subdivision? Was 17 lots? Is that right?
Tim or John or Andy?
Yes, it was 17. This is Andy with PCI.
Okay, and then now it's down to this 14. Okay.
Correct.
And there's just no way you think that okay, is it absolutely necessary to build on the slopes? It sounds like what was the why do the lots have to be on the slope, I guess is the question.
For the density, we've already taken the 2/3 reduction. There's already a house on the hill. And our interest to have a lot, there's buildable areas there. You know, it's that deal of you can't put, it's that delicate balance. You know, you can't go with the current rules and put 14 lots down on the flat and preserve ag. You know, and that's why it's been great extent to try to find this balance between the ag community and preservation. There's already a roadway going up the hillside, which is where we're proposing the existing driveway to follow that alignment. That benched area is already an altered site. I'm pretty sure that benched area is not a natural, and that was created for that home site was already there. So this proposal has 4 new houses on the butte versus the 4 new with 5 total lots. So there's 1 already there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, to both Andy and John, I think you have hit on one of the conundrums with any development proposals, is that balance between various competing interests, such as our community interest in preserving prime agricultural soils, balanced against also concerns of what it means to build on hillsides for view sheds, open space, and wildlife habitat. One point I wanted to make, and before I forget it, I want to say that sadly, I think a former county commission flinched when they had the opportunity to memorialize in the subdivision regulations more specificity that I think would have addressed the concern for ability and kind of going into these projects with some sense of what the quantifiable parameters are, because it is unfortunate that the hand that we are dealt by state law and the Subdivision and Platting Act leaves the governing body at the very tail end of the process here. And I don't know whether this truly is the statutory deadline to take action on our part or not, but clearly us being involved at the very end of the process leaves no opportunity for much by way of dialogue in the points of decision points in planning to get here. So all of that to say, at some point in time, I would be amenable to revisit division regulations and putting in more specificity in terms of our expectation of what amount of acreage or percentage of a parcel ought to be dedicated for agricultural mitigation purposes. Tim, what is the, since I, in passing, broached the idea, what is the statutory deadline for us taking action? Is it today?
Well, in effect it is. I mean, November 9th technically is the 60-day deadline.
Okay. Yeah, the only other thing I would add is and this is not what anyone's going to want to hear from the property owner or developer representative standpoint. I feel like staff recommendations and findings of fact and conclusions of law are fairly solid in this regard. I think this is a better design than what came before us previously, but I think it's still, when weighed in the balance, is found wanting when it comes to the amount of mitigation for prime agricultural lands and soils. I would suggest deleting some lots on the fly to help achieve that, but we've been counseled that doing such would probably surpass a threshold of what would kick this back to an earlier phase of review.
Commissioner Strohmeyer?
Yes.
I do have a point to make. I think with what's been introduced today by the letter that was sent just before the hearing, that we have what constitutes new information offered up by the applicant's representative for mitigating a particular impact. And I think it needs to be considered. And what the regulations allow for is a suspension of the review period and the scheduling essentially of a subsequent hearing to address the new information.
Is there any other opportunity to address comments or concerns that have been, that the public has shared, so it's not just bird habitat with that new hearing, or is that new hearing specific to?
Yeah, I guess the question, Tim, would be what constitutes new information? Would anything that has been brought forward by the public clear that bar, or truly having passed the 11th hour, received this bird habitat study today and not having had a chance to even look at that before today's meeting? I think that is clearly within the realm of new information, but would anything else qualify as that?
I'm not really seeing anything else today that qualifies as such. I mean, this is a very specific mitigation offering, including the graphics that were shown for plantings, etc. And I think there's sort of a detailed aspect to it that needs to be analyzed as to, what's the impact of that. As a, for instance, that vegetation would have to be irrigated, and this property is under a 10 acre-foot threshold for combined appropriation, so that would have to be factored in. But I guess what I would recommend, commissioners, and this is something for Andy and John too, I would recommend considering another hearing date for this, December 3rd or December 10th, I believe, are open at present.
And I guess just to add on to that, Tim, I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that what I saw by way of the bird habitat mitigation is probably not the major concern that I have over this subdivision. It's more the design and failure to adequately mitigate for agricultural impacts. So even if what we saw by way of the design schematic from the Bozeman advisor was worth implementing, it would not necessarily play the major role in my decision.
Okay.
But Commissioner Vero, I'll leave it.
No, I feel the same way. I don't want to waste Andy's, folks' time. If it would just be denied, then once we were able to fully assess Lynn's work, because again, like the slope concerns, the agriculture concerns, like the opportunity for what Fred was proposing, the conservation design. I mean, there seems to be a solution to this that the community can support, and we're getting there. I feel like we can get there, but the lot configuration with what it is now and what Brett was talking about with, oh my gosh, I can't see them right now. Is that lot 10 and 14? The inability to kind of build on them and his concerns. So yes, all of this is something that I feel like we can address, but just having a hearing to explore the bird migration mitigation would maybe not be in folks' best interest.
I don't think so. A question for Andy or John. I think you may sense how this is going here today, so we can either proceed as we have earlier in the meeting and take action today, or you can withdraw your application or grant a delay in us taking action and think this through some more.
I think our position suggestion would be is you should take action on the proposal you have in front of you today.
We can do that.
So Commissioner,
bring up the motion.
Were you going to say something, Tim?
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily belabor the new information piece, but I think it is something that we ought to consider just per state law and what our regs say, because if you all determine new information has been received, which is relevant and credible, you shall hold a subsequent public hearing. Because basically the new information needs a public vetting, if you will. It needs a reasonable opportunity to have access to that information, if that makes sense.
Yep, understood.
Yeah.
So this gets
postponed
to December?
Yeah, December 3rd or December 10th. And a couple tests for the new information is it relevant? And under our regulations, relevant information would be new information or the analysis of the information is considered relevant if it may impact the findings and conclusions the governing body will rely upon to make a final decision upon the proposed subdivision. And credible information is new information or analysis of the information. It's considered credible if based on physical facts or evidence, corroborated personal observations, or scientific data.
Which,
so
it has new credible information.
So John or Andy, if it looks like to err on the side of safety here, we're going to have another public hearing on this. Is December 3rd or December 10th in your preference?
It would be the 3rd would be our preference if we have to have one.
Yeah, given the non-discretionary language that Tim just read in state law, Is that our regulations or state statute, Tim, that you just read from?
Well, I did read out of our regulations, but the new information piece does come out of the MCAs. And if I could lobby, I would lobby for December 10th. It just gives everybody one extra week.
Andy and John, can you live with December 10th?
I think we can do accommodate, yes, if need be. I guess one of the things a question I had, and I mentioned this at the Monday meeting, and I informed you guys that there would probably be some anticipated mitigation. And unfortunately, this is the process we sort of get stuck with, and it's very frustrating. You know, we are put on notice after we spend months going through sufficiency, element, back and forth, and then we get to first part of September, and the first inclination we get is that's not going to do it. And what frustrates me more is the fact of, I'll use the example of the bird letter. It comes out in April, and there's a lot of issues being made with it now from staff and, you know, from commission level and other things. The concern about the bird species is one. And I don't know when in this process we're supposed to work on mitigation. It seems like this mitigation needs to be worked on and understood far in advance of where we are in this process, because it drags us out to the 11th hour and puts everyone in these predicaments that aren't viable. And I'm hearing concerns not about only the birds, but the issue of the slopes. But I also have heard, you know, Dave mention ag, and I guess I'm looking for guidance of, again, back to when I pointed out earlier, there is no guidance. What more are we supposed to do? I mean, are we going to go work on more mitigation in this another 4-week reprieve? And what more can I do? I mean, I can't beat a farmer into farming this. We've done great extent to try to come up with a mitigation. And we talk about these imaginary rules and these things in the future, but I think you have to deal with applications that are there in front of us. And I don't know how we can tell this guy again, this developer who's already came and tried to think outside that box and proposed the plan variation, and that was a non-starter just because of plan variation. So we go back, we comply with the rules, we comply with the zoning, and now we're going to tell him to hang on, wait a while, we're going to work on this. Well, that's concerning to me, that you've got an application that's compliant, that goes through the process, and I don't know how you tell a guy just to keep waiting. He doesn't quite meet the mark. Something better is coming. That's concerning. And I guess I'm looking for advice. If there's anything on this ag mitigation that we're missing, I look for any hint or guidance to what that might be, because we're not looking for a new application. That's not on the table.
Oh, so I can tell you right. I'll tell you right now that something more closely resembling what was under consideration a number of years ago, which I think was well-founded, is pushing 50% set aside of the prime agricultural soils. And I hear you, and I would certainly hope that the development community would get behind another run at the subdivision regulations that would more clearly articulate this, because I don't particularly like being in the position late in the day at the 11th hour of when we need to make a decision, only now expressing to applicants who've invested significant time and money into these projects that, you know what, this is not what the governing body really had in mind. So that's about as good as I can get right now.
I mean, it definitely needs to happen. We already felt like we hit a reset, because we came back and pulled the application back and delayed the process after we got the first round of CPAC letter. And we did that, and that was a reset. And we did that, and then we still just kind of ran into a wall again. And, you know, some of the things we heard is it wasn't viable. And my research has shown it's not unviable. If there's any measure, it's this arbitrary guess or, you know, this qualitative investment on what's enough. And there's no bookends, there's no guidance.
Yeah, I understand your frustration.
It is not as clear cut as one would like. I do not deny that. So that's where we leave it today, folks. We will reconvene and continue this public hearing until December 10th. Thank you everyone for participating today and hanging with us for a very long meeting, but I think there's been some good discussion, some new information that has been brought forward. And with that, we'll keep the public hearing open. Is there any other business to come before the commission today? Okay. Seeing none, we will be adjourned.
Have a good evening, everyone.